Chapter 1047. Noble person? The scholar was startled, and then he said with a faint smile, "You used the word noble to describe him? I'm really surprised to hear such words coming out of your mouth." The Saintess of Underworld glanced at him, and then she grabbed the black sand from the silver urn and carefully sprinkled it on the ground in the yard. She quietly sprinkled handfuls after handfuls of black sand, but when the black sand fell to the ground, it made a rustling sound, breaking the silence. Seeing the Saintess ignore him, the scholar smiled bitterly and looked behind him. He took a step back and sat on the knee-high corridor under the porch. He folded his bare feet and sat cross-legged by the grindstone with his hands on his knees, silently watching the Saintess of Underworld step back while sprinkling the black sand. He thought he was very patient and could wait for the Saintess to finish the whole yard. However, she was so meticulous that he couldn't be fast. 2 hours later, not even half of the small courtyard was finished. The scholar couldn't help but rub his forehead helplessly. He found that his patience seemed to be unable to endure for even 2 hours. Moreover, it seemed that it would take at least another 2 hours. Compared to the long years that he had experienced, what was 1 to 4 hours worth of time? But now, it was unbelievable. He then sat under the eaves and muttered to himself, "Ever since I experienced that great battle in the human world, it was as if I was enlightened. Only then did I realize that the power of heaven is unpredictable. There seems to be a pair of heavenly eyes watching everything, and it's not something that we can contend against. In the long river of time, I, Bai Qi, am not the first emperor of the underworld to rule over the underworld, and I don't think I will be the last emperor of the underworld. I know this, so I, Bai Qi, don't hope to die with the world." Hearing this, the Saintess of the Underworld scattered a handful of black sand and looked back at him. She continued to do things that others couldn't understand and said coldly, "Since you've already seen through it, why do you still come here to nag at me? Don't tell me that you didn't come here to ask me about your fate this time?" Hehe. "Although I don't want to die with heaven and earth, I don't want to end up in a miserable way. If my fate is destined to end in a miserable way, then why can't I, Bai Qi, fight against my fate? It is said that even ants are greedy for life. No matter how magnanimous I, Bai Qi, am, I am not immune." The scholar spoke slowly like an old monk in meditation. A firefly that was hanging upside down under the eaves fell down and fluttered lightly behind him. Suddenly, it landed on the millstone behind him. The flickering light was reflected back by the white jade wall, making the scholar who said that he was not immune to vulgarity seem somewhat extraordinary and refined. Sophistry. "In the end, we're back to square one," the Netherworld Saintess said with a cold snort. "Regardless of whether I'm being unreasonable or not, I'm telling the truth. There's no doubt about that." The scholar looked at her and smiled faintly. "Why did you meet me when you came out of that place and not someone else? Why are you always in front of me? Isn't this fate? This should also be a part of my fate. Perhaps the heavens have already given me a chance to change my fate. Since there's already a solution in front of me, I, Bai Qi, naturally have to fight for it. Otherwise, it would be tantamount to defying the heavens. Don't you think so? Then have you ever thought that perhaps my arrival is an important factor that allows you to walk towards your final fate?" The Netherworld Saintess said faintly. As soon as these words came out, the scholar frowned and fell into deep thought. "Ai, you and I have been together for so many years. Humans aren't grass or trees. We can't be emotionless." The masked woman, who was like a fairy scattering flowers, suddenly sighed lightly and said with some reluctance, "It's not that I don't want to tell you. It's my honor that the heavens allowed me to peep into the fate of others. However, they only allowed me to be a bystander and didn't give me the right to reveal the fate of others. Every time I peep into the fate of a person, I feel that there's a voice in the unseen world warning me that if I were to reveal the fate of others, I would definitely suffer the wrath of the heavens. My mother is a good example." "Your mother?" The scholar had a stunned look on his face as he looked at her in disbelief. In the past he had asked her about her origins several times, but he didn't get a single reply. He didn't expect that she would actually mention her mother today. He couldn't help but be surprised as he said, "If that's the case, your mother can also peep into the fate of others like you. Why did you come out from there? What's in there exactly? Can't you tell me about your origins?" "This has nothing to do with you. Besides, it's my secret. I don't want to tell others so easily." The Netherworld Saintess scattered the black sand calmly. The scholar had already expected this. He shrugged his shoulders and suddenly, a faint light of wisdom flashed in his eyes. He muttered to himself, "You were able to give the token to Yu Qianqiu. I wonder how noble this noble person you speak of is. I won't hide it from you. You must know that the unspeakably noble you speak of is unable to not move my heart. I wonder if his nobility can be beneficial to me?" The netherworld saintess was taken aback and stopped what she was doing. She turned around and looked at him meaningfully as if she had thought of something. In fact, she had only given the token of the netherworld emperor to that female ghost cultivator, and she had never said that she had given the token to Yu Qianqiu. However, the owner of the token had mistakenly thought that she had given the token to Yu Qianqiu again and again. All these coincidences seemed to have reminded her of something all of a sudden, and she seemed to have peeped into something. She was lost in thought. The roulette of fate had never stopped its operation. It was mighty and irreversible, like the evolution of the endless stars in the universe. It was complicated and mysterious and could only be described as the general trend. As a bystander, she could see a little bit of it, but she could only obey it. She didn't have the right to reverse it. If she tried to change something by force, it would be useless. Nobody could reverse the evolution of the endless stars in the universe. If she didn't follow the trend, she would be crushed into powder. Having figured this out, she didn't want to tell the scholar the truth that she hadn't given the token of the netherworld emperor to Yu Qianqiu. Seeing her in a daze, the scholar asked curiously, "What's wrong? Did I hit the nail on the head?" His eyes flickered. He was eager to know the answer, but he knew he couldn't force her. He could only look forward to it. The saintess of the underworld exhaled softly. The black veil covering half of her face fluttered slightly, and then she regained her calmness. She stopped her homework and walked to the scholar with the silver urn in her arms. She put the urn under the millstone, turned around and sat down with the scholar. They looked like a couple, but in fact they weren't. The scholar was taken aback again, showing a rare expression. It was the first time he had sat so close to her. He couldn't help but tilt his head and look at her face rudely. She had a bright and full forehead full of wisdom, smoky eyebrows that looked like distant mountains, and a pair of bright eyes under her long eyelashes that were as calm as the autumn water, but sometimes they sparkled as if she could see things that others couldn't. The black veil rested on the bridge of her nose, and the tempting lips under the black veil could be vaguely seen. "I dare to bet that if you take off the black veil on your face, you will definitely be a rare beauty." The scholar snickered. The saintess of the underworld turned around and stared at him coldly. "My father took off my mother's veil because he made a bet with someone. In the end, he died a horrible death and could never be reincarnated. Why, do you want to give it a try?" The scholar couldn't smile anymore. It was as if someone was strangling his neck, and he looked to the front in embarrassment. "There are 3 types of people in this world whose fates I can't see. Firstly, I can't see my own fate. Secondly, there are almighty beings who can completely control their own fate. Thirdly, there are people whose fates are unpredictable and full of unpredictability." The saintess of the underworld suddenly said these words out of the blue. The scholar was taken aback, and then he said solemnly, "There are people in this world who can completely control their own fate? Could they be experts from the immortal realm?" The saintess of the underworld shook her head slightly and said, "The so-called people who can completely control their own fate are not people who can get rid of all shackles and do whatever they want. The universe is vast and full of unknown changes. It is an eternal mystery that includes everything. It is right above our heads, silently watching our every move. It is the heavens that we speak of. All those who go against the heavens will be mercilessly crushed into powder. Therefore, there are almighty beings who want to follow its trajectory and follow the path it leads. They want to pursue immortality like the stars in the universe, and so this path is called the heavenly Tao. However, there are very few cultivators who can truly step on this path. But once they follow the footsteps of the heavenly Tao, their cultivation may advance by leaps and bounds, leaving everyone else in the dust. Those who step on the heavenly Tao will be brilliant and dazzling, and their fates are not something I can see. Of course, the heavenly Tao is hard to find, and it is extremely difficult to follow the footsteps of the heavenly Tao forever. We don't know where the end is, and we will most likely get lost on this long journey. I don't know if anyone can walk to the end." Heavenly Tao. The scholar gasped in awe. The vast domain that he had never touched suddenly appeared in front of him, and he suddenly felt so small. He couldn't help but raise his head to look at the pitch-black night sky. After a long time he slowly let out a breath and said with a bitter smile, "You suddenly told me this. Could it be that you want to tell me that Yu Qianqiu is a person who has stepped on the heavenly Tao?" Him? No. The saintess of the underworld shook her head with certainty and said, "He is the last of the 3 types of people I mentioned. His fate is unpredictable and full of variables. I want to peek at it but I am dazzled. His fate gives me a messy feeling. True and false are mixed together, making me feel dizzy and uncomfortable, and even nauseous to the point of wanting to vomit. I can't sort it out at all, and I'm afraid that even he himself is at a loss and is messing around without knowing why." Chapter 1048. The scholar nodded his head in amazement. To think that someone can have such a fate. It's not an exaggeration to say that fate is unpredictable and full of variables. But then again, it must be extremely rare for someone to have such a fate. Can we say that this is a person with a special fate? The netherworld saintess nodded her head and said, "There is a saying that this kind of person is someone who makes a living in the cracks of the heavenly Tao. It is equivalent to giving him a different path from ordinary people and letting him live or die on his own. It's just a matter of whether he can walk to the end. It is unknown whether this kind of person is favored by the heavenly Tao or abandoned by the heavenly Tao. No one can say for sure what is going on. It is precisely because of this that it is full of variables." The scholar didn't know whether to laugh or cry. He said, "But you gave the token to such a person. According to what you said, how can he be considered a noble person? Could it be that you want to see if he can walk to the end?" The netherworld saintess thought for a while and didn't reveal that she didn't give the token to Yu Qianqiu. She only said indifferently, "I am just saying. Whether he is a noble person or not is relative. I am just guessing if someone like him who makes a living in the cracks of the heavenly Tao can pull some people whose fate is already fixed to another fork in the road of fate." The smile on the scholar's face gradually froze. He squinted his eyes at her and said, "You are saying that he can change my fate?" He suddenly faintly guessed that the reason why she said these words to him for the first time was to tell him that his fate would not be any better in the future. As for Yu Qianqiu, because he lived in the cracks of the heavenly Tao, because he had no fate to speak of, he could not abide by the rules of the game. He could do things that others could not, such as changing the fate of others. Although he didn't know if the fate he changed was good or bad, as she said, it was only relative whether he was a noble person or not. Therefore he deduced that those who were bad to Yu Qianqiu would naturally return the favor. Those who were good to Yu Qianqiu would naturally receive the corresponding retribution. This was the difference between good and bad. Otherwise, why would she give her token to Yu Qianqiu? There was a suspicion that he was trying to express his goodwill. Smart people would often think that they had seen through the propositions, but they would often be fooled by their own cleverness. As for whether it was good or bad, only time would tell. At the very least, that was what the scholar was certain of at the moment. The saintess of the underworld abruptly stood up and turned around to pick up the silver urn. Frowning, she said, "I've already told you that I can't peek into his fate. This is your own wild guess. Alright. You've been bothering me for a long time. It's time to go." The scholar put down his leg and stood up as well. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but when he thought about the other party's habits and temper, he knew that it would be futile to ask anything else since she had already asked him to leave. Immediately he moved to the outside of the wall in a flash. Seeing that she was doing that boring thing again, he couldn't help but shake his head and leave. Strolling along the small path in the forest, the scholar raised his head and lowered his head from time to time. His feet were bare and he seemed to be thinking about something while sighing. Unknowingly, he had returned to the side of his pavilion. Then he turned around and looked in the direction he had just come from. His gaze became firm as he quickly walked back into the pavilion. When he arrived at the window upstairs, he rhythmically knocked on the windowsill. A silver light flashed and 1,000 silver-armored soldiers appeared outside the window, waiting for orders. The scholar muttered to himself as he slowly ordered, "Immediately investigate the whereabouts of Yu Qianqiu. Report back to me as soon as possible." The silver-armored soldiers were startled for a moment. Then they immediately cupped their fists and said, "Yes." Then they disappeared in a flash. Just when the scholar was about to sit back on the rocking chair, a ray of golden light pierced through the night sky and instantly reached the window. A dignified man dressed in an exceptionally gorgeous golden robe appeared. His slender eyes flickered as he glanced at the rocking chair by the window. Then he opened his thin lips and said, "Bai Qi, you seem to be living a leisurely and carefree life. How can I be as leisurely and carefree as you? It's dark here and there are a lot of people who don't listen to me. Unlike you in the beautiful and colorful immortal realm, where no one dares to disobey your orders. The scholar placed his hands behind his back and revealed an arrogant expression as he mocked. Jin Tai, you don't come without a reason. Speak. What do you want from me this time? It turned out that this sudden visitor was the Supreme Emperor of the Immortal Realm, Jin Tai. One was the Supreme Emperor of the Underworld, and the other was the Supreme Emperor of the Immortal Realm. The scene of the two meeting was not something that ordinary people could see. It's a meeting between old friends, no need to be so harsh. Jin Tai said with an expressionless face, when you came to my immortal palace I welcomed you with open arms. How can I block a guest outside the window like you did? The scholar snorted coldly, but he still turned around and left with his hands clasped behind his back, opening up the window. Jin Tai teleported and appeared inside the window. Like an indescribably noble emperor, he slowly and majestically paced around the pavilion, examining the furnishings inside. He shook his head slightly and said, "It's still those rotten things, old-fashioned furnishings. As the Supreme Emperor of the Underworld, why do you have to live such a simple life? No matter how simple and plain you are in the eyes of others, you are still the Emperor of the Underworld by Qi who slaughtered millions of living beings in the Underworld. No one will say anything good about you. A king should act like a king and you can't lower yourself." A rotten thing? The scholar waved his hand disdainfully, revealing an unreasonable look as he said, "Don't tell me that everyone has to be like you, sitting on a golden lump, lying on a golden lump, even sharing a bed with a woman is on a golden lump. Aren't you bored out of your mind? A tasteless guy like you doesn't deserve to point fingers in front of me. Of course it's a little simple but it can't be compared to you. Every day there are a lot of people singing your praises in your ears, and there are groups of beautiful singers surrounding you to serve you. You live like a local tyrant in the world. I really admire you. Groups of beautiful singers surrounding me, but they can't be compared to you. You have a beautiful woman like Hei Qi to serve you. Why don't we change our tastes? I'll give you a group of beautiful singers and you give me Hei Qi a group of beautiful singers for you. You won't lose anything." Jin Tai clasped his hands behind his back and looked at the complicated files on the shelf. Although he was joking, his expression and tone were still harsh and cold. Seemed like he was not born to joke. "Do you think everyone is as perverted as you?" The scholar rolled his eyes and suddenly sneered, "It's not that I can't change it. I don't need those rotten things that you have been spoiling and trusting. However, I am a little interested in Ji Wu. Why don't you give Ji Wu to me and I give you Hei Qi? What do you think?" Hearing this, Jin Tai slowly turned around and stared at the scholar for a while. Then he nodded, "All right, but not now. When I'm tired of playing with her, I'll change my tastes with you." If someone were to hear that the exalts of the immortal world and the exalts of the netherworld were actually discussing such a dirty deal, what would they think? They would probably feel ashamed of their own inferiority since they could even exchange their own women at any time. Especially Ji Wu, who was about to be married. If she knew about this conversation, how would she endure it? The scholar's mouth twitched and revealed a defeated expression. He waved his hand and said, "No wonder even your name has the word Yi in it. You are simply a natural pervert. Speak. What do you want from me?" "Nothing, I just suddenly wanted to see you." Jin Tai met the other party's sarcastic gaze and said without a change in expression, "There's something I don't understand. How could a lowly pawn of my immortal world receive the favor of a dignified netherworld emperor like you and even give him the netherworld emperor's token? You didn't even give it to that woman Hei Qi. Also, the army of Onyx and that person from the immortal world called Mu Bing worked together to kill that pawn. Why do I feel that this matter is a bit strange? He is also a small character, so how could he mobilize the army of Onyx? Is it related to my external affairs commander? This happened in your territory and with your influence. Don't tell me you didn't investigate the inside story. You and I have an agreement. In order to maintain our respective rule over the two worlds, we must exchange what we need. So, I hope you can be honest with me." The scholar looked at him with a smile, but countless thoughts were running through his mind. This fellow was cunning and vicious and could even be said to be inhumane. He had already experienced this before. Some things could be said, but there were also things he absolutely couldn't let the scholar know. The theory of fate involving the saintess of the underworld naturally couldn't be leaked. Otherwise, only the heavens knew what would happen. "What are you laughing at? Could it be that you're behind this?" Jean Tai's slender eyes narrowed into slits, flashing with a cold light like that of a venomous snake. I just find it strange. With your arrogant eyes, why would you pick a pawn like Yu Qianqiu to make a song? You even specially issued a decree, so how could I not be interested? The scholar sighed. It just so happened that I met that brat at the dragon transformation gate. I looked at him from left to right in the dark and felt that it wasn't your style. Since you, Immortal Emperor Jean Tai, wanted to praise him, how could I, Bai Qi, stay idle? Thus I asked someone to secretly give him a token. However, I reckon that even he didn't know that it was my Emperor of the Underworld's token. When he took it out, he was probably dumbfounded. Hehe. It just so happens that I'm also bored. I want to see how that brat will behave in the future. After giving a bunch of reasons, he added in his mind, surnamed you brat, I spent a lot of effort to help you, so you should be thanking me in the future. Otherwise, with this old fox's viciousness, you'll be dead for sure. So that's what happened. Jean Tai's slender eyes slowly opened. He believed what the scholar said. With the other party's usual style of arguing with him, it wasn't strange for him to do such a thing. It would be strange if he didn't ask about it. He coldly snorted, ridiculous. Only someone like you who doesn't care about your status would do such a ridiculous thing. As for why I asked him to compose a song, you don't need to be suspicious. There's nothing shameful about it. First, Jiwu took a fancy to the song he composed. Second, I heard that the song he composed had an unusual flavor, so I could use it. As for after this, if he can display his talents to please me, I'll keep him if he's useful. If he's useless, someone will naturally take care of him. He's not worth worrying about. Let's talk about my second question. What have you found on your side? Chapter 1049. I haven't found anything yet. The scholar's expression was a bit stiff. This wasn't something to be happy about. Jean Tai slowly turned to the window and said indifferently, Bai Qi, do you think I'm a 3-year-old child? If you can't even find out about this, I think you'd better give up your position as the Emperor of the Underworld to someone else. The meaning of his words couldn't be clearer. He clearly didn't believe the scholar's words. I want to let you sit, do you dare? The scholar snorted and also walked to the window. Standing side by side with Jean Tai, he said, don't talk nonsense. I don't have the mood to beat around the bush with you. It's not that I didn't try my best to find out the truth. It's just that I haven't found anything yet. The people involved in the matter are all dead and some key figures even committed suicide. Don't you think it's strange? Committed suicide? Jean Tai suddenly tilted his head and raised his sword-like eyebrows. This matter is a bit strange and unpredictable. It seems that your control over the underworld is really not flattering. Someone actually dared to play this kind of trick under your nose. Haven't you found the mastermind behind it? You don't need to worry about my side. I know what I'm doing. The scholar put his hands on the windowsill and looked at the fireflies shining in the forest. He said indifferently, but you should investigate carefully on your side. There's one thing I need to remind you. This time, it's not only the army of Dark and the father-in-law of your external affairs commander. There are also the subordinates of the King of Black Mountain. The 3 forces are led by Mu Bing. Mu Bing alone can't cause such a big wave. I'm afraid your external affairs commander isn't simple. The King of Black Mountain? Jean Tai's slender eyes flickered. He said, I've heard of this person for a long time. I heard that he's very powerful. Haven't you investigated his background? He suddenly appeared many years ago. After swallowing several territories with thunderous means, he hasn't made any moves since. He's a bit mysterious. The scholar lightly patted the windowsill and said indifferently, the underworld is not like your immortal world. The more mysterious a person is, the more difficult it is to act rashly. But this time he actually took the initiative to interfere with me. If I don't do something, it'll be a little unreasonable. Jean Tai nodded slightly and said, the Black Mountain King, the Black Nether Army, and my external affairs great commander, These 3 groups of people actually wore the same pair of pants. What were they trying to do? You want to rebel? As he spoke, he turned to Scholar and said, don't be in a hurry to make a move on this matter. Let's get to the bottom of this matter first. It's fine if we don't make a move, but once we do, we must eradicate the root of the problem. Don't leave any hidden dangers behind. Both of us should keep in touch with the progress of the matter. After he finished speaking, he turned into a streak of golden light and disappeared into the distant night sky. He left as soon as he finished what he had to do. He had no intention of staying for even a moment longer. In the surging immortal realm, amidst the vast and tumbling sea of clouds, there was a tall mountain that pierced the heavens like a sword. The mountain was extremely steep and there was no way to find it. It was surrounded by cliffs and precipitous cliffs. Ordinary people could only look up at it and sigh. More than half of the mountain peak abruptly emerged from the surging sea of clouds. One could see the tangled vines hanging down from the surrounding mountain walls. There was no lack of inspirational eagles building their nests on the high and dangerous mountain. A heavenly wind swept through the sea of clouds. As the vines swayed, a series of resounding eagle cries could be heard. Several eagles drilled out of their nests and soared against the strong wind. Behind the mountain wall, behind the swaying vines, 14 unforgettable and awe-inspiring words were carved vertically in 3 rows on the steep mountain wall. The words were each tens of feet in size. The heavenly wind still pushed the clouds away. Even the ancient vines that were as thick as a child's arm could not hide the true appearance of the words. The heavens are heartless and the earth is heartless. I think of you and I will also forget my feelings. The words were deeply embedded in the mountain and had been eroded by wind and rain. It was obvious that they had existed for countless years. Suddenly the clouds gradually turned red. The rising sun jumped out of the distant sea of clouds in an instant, illuminating the heaven and earth. The sword-like mountain peak welcomed the first ray of morning light. A rainbow formed at a visible speed from one end of the sea of clouds to the other end. It just happened to be stranded on the mountain peak that rose out of the sea of clouds. Such a beautiful scene was exceptionally spectacular and breathtaking. It was a wonder of heaven and earth that could not be replicated. This mountain was called the Grave of Love. It implied that it was a grave that buried love. It could be said to be famous in the celestial world. It was the solitary cultivation place of Wang Qing, the leader of the Heartless Palace, the #1 sect in the celestial world. In other words, only Wang Qing cultivated in the entire Grave of Love. The other people of the Heartless Palace did not dare to share it with him. Because under the cliffs of this mountain peak, not only love was buried, but also the bones of Wang Qing after he killed his wife and children and slaughtered hundreds of people in his family. How could the other disciples of the Heartless Palace cultivate in peace on this mountain? Even though this mountain was very big, a tall and thin man stood at the peak of the Grave of Love, with his hands behind his back. His wide blue robe fluttered in the wind, and his unbound long hair fluttered behind him. It was like a dream, giving people the illusion that he was standing at the top of a rainbow. Behind him there was a simple stone house built with a few pieces of stone. He wore a silver mask that covered his entire face. Only a pair of indifferent eyes could be seen in the 2 eye sockets. Facing the rising sun, he was not afraid of the glare and was still calm. At this moment the silver mask reflected a magnificent color. It was dazzling like a celestial being. Originally there were no impurities on the smooth mask, but at this moment because of the sunlight, 2 faint tear stains appeared under the eye sockets, extending all the way to the mouth. As a result, it gave people a strange feeling. It was as if this mask was crying silently in sadness and despair. It was unknown how such a strange mask was made. He was none other than the sect master of the #1 sect in the celestial realm, Wang Qing. He was also the powerhouse who founded the #1 sect in the celestial realm, Heartless Palace. He was able to cultivate in the place where hundreds of his family members were dumped for so many years, and still show such indifference in his eyes. It was clear that his mind was extraordinary. Perhaps, it was more appropriate to describe him as heartless. A ray of light suddenly pierced through the surging sea of clouds, scaring away a few soaring eagles. It landed directly behind Wang Qing, whose long hair and robe were fluttering in the wind. Mei He, the consecrator of Heartless Palace, appeared and bowed to Wang Qing. Master. Wang Qing did not turn his head, nor did he make any sound. He silently endured the baptism of the wind and the sun, as if he did not notice Mei He's arrival at all. Mei He seemed to be used to all of this and did not mind at all. After bowing respectfully, he summoned a dazzling snow-blue sword from his storage bracelet. The blue was so pure and thorough that its smooth surface faintly gave people a dazzling feeling of snow white. With one look, one could tell that it was an extraordinary treasure, but it was so huge that it could even be described as deformed. The width of the sword was even wider than the shoulders of Mei He, who stood side by side. The sword was more than 4 meters long and the sword hilt was also a meter long. Altogether it was a huge sword that was at least 5 meters long. Although the blade of the sword was unusually sharp, it could be used as a bed to sleep. The strangest part was the sword hilt. The way it was forged was not like a normal sword hilt. It was formed by 6 dragons that were as thick as a wrist, hollowed out and arched together. The 6 dragon heads bit to form a handguard, and the 6 dragon tails twisted together to form a sword tail. It was covered in dragon scales and looked lifelike. In this way, it prevented the sword hilt from being too thick, making it impossible for people to grasp it with one hand. It meant that one could grab a dragon from 6 directions at any time as the sword hilt. It could be seen that it was forged with great care. Although it was not Mei's first time seeing this huge sword, his heart could not help but tremble when his eyes fell on it. He respectfully held the snow-blue huge sword with both hands and reported, "Master. The mythical Fire Palace sect leader Wuxia personally forged this sword for Master. I have already retrieved it. However, this sword is too huge, so it might be a little inconvenient to use. It weighs 13,000 kilograms. In fact, all the disciples of the Heartless Palace were Wang Qing's disciples, including Grey Cloud Exen. Those disciples who received Wang Qing's teachings but did not reach a certain level of cultivation within a certain period of time were all killed by Wang Qing. Now almost all the disciples in the Heartless Palace were the disciples of Grey Cloud Xian and the group of Grey Cloud Xian's disciples. This time I owe old Hua a big favor." Wang Qing finally spoke in an extremely calm voice. There was no fluctuation of emotion in his tone, as if he was reciting a paragraph word by word. "Owe him a favor? I don't think so." Mei smiled bitterly and said, "The Heartless Palace has been around for more than 50,000 years. Countless disciples have been sacrificed to collect the best blacksmithing metal in the 3 realms, the blue sea gold essence. There's a mountain of it, but he has squandered it to this point. Who knows if he has embezzled it or not? Not to mention the endless supply of treasures, we even gave him 3 trillion divine-grade spirit stones as wages, not a single piece less. How could we owe him a favor?" Wang Qing slowly turned around. The wind was still blowing, but at this time his long hair and robe were motionless, not moving in the slightest. An indifferent gaze shot out from behind the mask, sweeping over the sword in Mei's hands. His voice was calm as he said, "Good sword. Elder Hua's investment in this sword is far greater than what we have invested. Spending 30,000 years to forge this sword, it has far surpassed all of old Hua's masterpieces. It can be said to be the culmination of his blood, sweat, and tears. The success of this sword has raised old Hua's refining skills to another level. I'm afraid there is no treasure in the 3 realms that can withstand this sword's sharpness. It's so amazing." Mei looked at the giant sword in his hand, which was bigger than a bed frame, incredulous. An unparalleled masterpiece comparable to a divine artifact. Truly an amazing masterpiece. Wang Qing expressed his admiration in a calm tone. A majestic aura suddenly surged out from his body, engulfing the giant sword in Mei's hand. A humming sound akin to a dragon's roar reverberated throughout the mountain peak, piercing one's eardrums. The sea of clouds at the foot of the mountain suddenly became turbulent. Mei could clearly feel an incomparable excitement coming from the giant sword in his hand. It vibrated non-stop as if a hidden dragon had awakened and was about to soar into the sky. Chapter 1050. In an instant the feeling became reality. The giant sword that was 5 meters long slowly floated up from his hand. The sharp and piercing dragon roar became a continuous stream that surged through the sky and the sea of clouds. Countless gazes looked over from all the mountains under the sea of clouds. They did not know what was happening on the peak of the love mound above the clouds. Mei looked at the giant sword, dumbfounded. He could clearly feel that the energy in his master's body had been withdrawn. The sword actually had a consciousness and floated up on its own. It was unbelievable. He thought it was an illusion. An unparalleled masterpiece, an amazing masterpiece. No wonder it is the artifact that old Hua spent 30,000 years refining with countless treasures. Even though it was almost the highest level of praise, Wang Qing's gaze towards the sword was still faint. The giant sword slowly circled around Wang Qing that stood on the top of the mountain. The sword hummed like a dragon's roar. It was like a dragon that had been trapped for countless years had finally seen the light of day and its master. It also seemed to be praying for something. Artifact. How could Wuxia be willing to hand over such a good thing? He looked at the giant sword that was filled with spirituality and gulped. He put himself in Hu Xiaozi's shoes. If he had forged such a treasure, he would never have handed it over. Naturally, there are things that outsiders do not know. You do not need to know so clearly. A calm voice slowly came from behind the silver mask. One more thing is very important. Although this sword is good, it is only an unparalleled sword in the hands of others. It is far from the level of an artifact. It needs someone to activate it. It is a sword. It needs someone to activate it with a powerful sword essence to give it the life of an artifact. In terms of the strength of the sword essence, who else in the 3 realms but me can activate it? Sword essence? So that's how it is. I have learned. He bowed respectfully and stood up straight. He looked at the humming giant sword and said excitedly, "Master, since the sword has been awakened by your sword essence, please give this sword a name." The giant sword seemed to understand his words. It flew faster around Wang Qing as if this was something it had been waiting for a long time. Wang Qing looked at the giant sword that floated in front of him from time to time. After a moment of silence, he calmly said word by word, "I grant you the name 6 Dragons Snow Blue." 6 Dragons Snow Blue. Every time the giant sword circled around to the front of Wang Qing, a syllable would come out of Wang Qing's mouth and hit the sword. 4 rounds. After withstanding 4 syllables, the giant sword suddenly erupted with a snow blue light. It blossomed on the summit of the mountain. The magnificent snow blue light instantly competed with the rising sun in splendor. Countless people on the various mountains below the sea of clouds looked at the sea of clouds above their heads in surprise. They didn't know if it was an illusion, but they seemed to have seen the sea of clouds that was dyed red suddenly turn blue. However, it was only for a moment, and then the sea of clouds returned to its original color. On the peak of the mountain, the snow blue light faded slightly. Then it turned into a snow blue treasure light and flowed on the surface of the giant sword. The charm of a divine weapon was undoubtedly revealed. Suddenly, a majestic and unparalleled sword intent erupted from the giant sword. It quickly surged between heaven and earth, forcing He to take a few steps back. Then he forcibly stabilized himself. However, Wang Qing stood there motionless like a mountain. The spectacular rainbow stranded on the peak of the mountain had already been washed away. A high-pitched sword hum sounded. A snow blue light suddenly shot up from the peak of the mountain and shot straight into the sky. It was as fast as a meteor chasing after the moon, dragging a thin and long tail behind it. The swift and fierce sword intent quickly spread out from the top of the mountain like a shock wave. The dense sea of clouds instantly stirred up huge ripples and surged out in all directions. The fiery red rays of the sun quickly cast on the undulating mountains below. All the disciples of the Heartless Palace who were standing outside had their mouths wide open as they witnessed the dense sea of clouds above their heads being pushed aside. Then the passionate fiery sunlight gradually spread and illuminated the green mountains and rivers like a pillar of light. Although the scene at this moment was extremely majestic, no one was in the mood to enjoy it. Everyone's pupils constricted as they stared at the snow blue light that shot into the sky. Everyone felt the majestic sword essence that shocked their hearts. Everyone looked at the peak of the Love Mound in admiration. Who else could have such a powerful sword essence other than the one on the peak of the mountain? Only he who was standing next to Wang Qing knew the truth. The majestic sword essence did not come from Wang Qing, the master of the sword, but from the sword itself. The people on the surrounding mountains could no longer see the snow blue light that shot into the sky. It seemed to have disappeared into the sky. Everyone watched for a long time. Just as they were scratching their heads, the snow blue light suddenly gave off a bright light and appeared in the sky. It became clearer and clearer like a brilliant meteor that was rushing down rapidly. The meteor flew in midair. Perhaps it was because of the friction with the moisture in the air. It suddenly produced a magnificent and strange scene that the disciples of the Heartless Palace would never forget. 6 rainbow-like giant flying dragons gradually appeared in the sky and became clearer and clearer. The 6 vigorous rainbow sky dragons shook their heads and wagged their tails as they chased after the dazzling meteor that shone with snow blue light. They headed straight for the vast land. Suddenly, it gave people the illusion that the 6 rainbow heavenly dragons were holding a dragon pearl and flying down from the outer realm to the mortal world. The 6 giant rainbow sky dragons covered the sky and the earth with majestic sword essence and crashed into the peak of the Love Mound. All the disciples of the Heartless Palace turned pale with fright and did not dare to breathe. With a loud boom, the vast mountains trembled. The birds and beasts cried out in fear and fled in all directions. The 6 giant rainbow sky dragons instantly disappeared and burrowed into the Love Mound mountain. It was as if the Love Mound was a dragon nest and they had returned from their travels. All the disciples of the Heartless Palace followed the mountain. After the earth shook, some people looked at the Love Mound mountain and heaved a sigh of relief. After the dust settled, although the aura of the 6 rainbow sky dragons was shocking, it was fortunate that they did not damage the sacred mountain in everyone's hearts. However, this was only the result from one angle. It might not be the same result from another angle. The disciples at another angle suddenly exclaimed. Someone pointed at the Love Mound and cried out involuntarily. The mountain split open. A straight and smooth crack appeared in the middle of the mountain. From the peak to the foot of the mountain, although the crack was only 1 meter wide, it directly split the Love Mound into 2 halves. The disciples at the right angle could see a thread of light like a sliver of sky in the crack. They and the disciples at the other end of the sliver of sky exclaimed in shock. The mountain really split open. The mountain really split open. Quickly report to the elders. Quickly report to the masters. Quickly report to the masters. Don't make any noise. Do what you need to do. Mei He's majestic voice rolled from the peak to the surrounding mountains. Hearing his voice, the surroundings immediately became silent. On the peak, Mei He, who had finished scolding, looked at the crack that was 1 meter wide between him and his master. It happened to separate the two of them. His master was on one side and his disciple was on the other. Mei He took a few steps forward and looked down at the crack. He immediately sucked in a breath of cold air. If this unparalleled sword had directly flattened the entire mountain, he would not have been so shocked. What shocked him was that it had actually split such a huge mountain in half. The cut was smooth. Other than this 1 meter wide crack, the entire mountain seemed to be undamaged. Although the mountain was tall, its rocks were brittle and hard. If it came into contact with a great force, it would be easy to shatter. However, the truth was right before his eyes. It was hard to believe. If it was a mountain piled up with mud, it would not be difficult to do so. Mei He exclaimed, as expected of a divine weapon, as expected of a divine weapon. Its power alone is already so strong. If Master were to wield it, who in the world could be Master's match? That's not necessarily true. However, at least we have the power to fight back. We won't be helpless and waiting to be trampled upon. This sword just had to be completed at this time. It must be the will of the heavens. It looks like some things are predestined. If we can't avoid it, we can only face it. Wang Qing's tone was calm. He put down his hands that had been behind his back and threw out 2 jade archives from his wide sleeves. He said, "Destroy them after you read them." Yes. Mei He's respectful demeanor was tinged with doubt. He did not know what his master wanted him to see. However, after he used his divine sense to examine them, his expression gradually turned serious. One of the 2 jade archives was sent by He Jingquang from the Ash Cloud sect. It recorded everything that had happened after he and Yu Qianzhou arrived in the underworld. It focused on analyzing the unknown events behind the assassination attempt on Yu Qianzhou. It clearly analyzed everything with reason and evidence. Although it was not 100% conclusive conclusion, the words revealed an incomparably heavy plea for his master Wang Qing to make early preparations to prevent a major crisis that might occur. The other jade archive was a message sent by a disciple of the Heartless Palace from the underworld. It also mentioned what had happened in Twilight City. It stated that the assassination attempt on Yu Qianzhou was still a mystery, and that it needed further investigation before reporting. Mei He clasped the 2 jade archives together and crushed them into powder with his palms, scattering them away with the wind. His expression was incomparably grave as he said, "I didn't expect the Immortal Palace to make a move against our Heartless Palace. High Deacon's analysis is correct. When Yu Qianzhou of the mystic Immortal City inexplicably came looking for you to cooperate, I was there as well. Yu Qianzhou's actions were indeed superfluous. I didn't expect there to be more than meets the eye. Master, we need to make early preparations. We cannot let the Immortal Palace have their way so easily. What's the rush?" Wang Qing slowly walked to the crack. He looked down and said calmly, "Whether it's true or not, before we are certain of victory, we will not make a move. Don't make a fool of yourself. The fate of Heartless Palace does not lie in how well prepared we are. It lies in the battle between me and Jin Tai. Chapter 1051. Although his tone was flat, the arrogance in it was obvious. He replied respectfully, yes. But he was excited and shocked. The meaning of his master's words was very clear. That was, with his master's current cultivation, only the immortal Emperor Jin Tai Kai was qualified to fight with him in the entire Immortal Palace. As for the others, they could not stop him at all, so there was no need for him to take them seriously. Wang Qing stretched out a wide palm towards the crack that had condensed into a claw. A snow-blue light buried at the bottom of the abyss shot out with a whoosh, and flipped in the air above the mountain peak. With a clang, it decisively stabbed into the ground not far behind him. Although almost half of the sword body was inserted into the stone ground, there was still a large part of the sword exposed. The flowing snow-blue light had already disappeared, and under the sunlight, there was a bright spot on the mountain peak that was shining brightly. This six-dragon snow-blue sword was quietly inserted into the mountain peak. From beginning to end, Wang Qing didn't touch it even once. In the next few months he still didn't touch it even once. In fact, he rarely even looked at it. The man and the sword faced each other from a distance, only communicating with each other through their minds that outsiders could not see. It was not until a few months later when Wang Qing left the mountain that the six-dragon snow-blue sword was pulled out of the mountain peak. If there is nothing else, you may leave, Wang Qing said indifferently. He seemed to remember something and took out a small red box. He held it with both hands and said, Hu Xiaozi wanted me to give this to master. Wang Qing did not ask what it was. He took the red box and held it in his palm in silence. After he left, he slowly opened it. The box was filled with snow-white silver sand. He tilted the box slightly, and the fine silver sand flowed out like water, drifting with the wind into the distance. Gradually, a snow-blue ring buried in the silver sand was revealed. He stretched out 2 fingers and picked up the ring. After the red box was abandoned, the silver sand rolled out and fell into the crack under his feet. This was a ring that was slightly wider than an ordinary ring. The material was obviously the same as the material used to forge the six-dragon snow-blue sword. They were both rare blue sea gold essence in the 3 realms. There was a huge independent space in the ring, several times larger than the 10 spaces in an ordinary storage bracelet. However, this did not fail to attract Wang Qing's attention. His gaze landed on the inner surface of the ring. The 2 words Ruyun were engraved on it, causing him to be unable to shift his gaze away for a long time. After a long time, Wang Qing sighed softly and said to himself, Old Hua, are you reminding me to remember something? Not many people knew the meaning of Ruyun. It was a woman's name. It was the name of Wang Qing's first wife. Also, what no one knew was that his wife's surname was Hua and her name was Ruyun. She was the sister of the Lifire Palace's sect leader Huajun. Back then there were 3 siblings. The eldest was Huolai Huokongzi, the second was Huajun Huashaozi, and the third was the younger sister Huadai Huaruyun. However, before the Lifire Palace was established, the third sister Huadai had already married Wang Qing. Other than those involved, no one else knew about this. Holding this snow-blue ring and silently looking at it for a while, Wang Qing finally put it on his left index finger. In the Paradise Wonderland, in the back garden of the Immortal Palace's External Affairs Great Commander's Mansion, the well-dressed Mu Tianjiao sat in a pavilion and silently wept. The quality of the golden robe was very good, and it didn't get wet even after being soaked. Her tears fell directly on it. Her right hand, which rested on the stone table, held a jade archive. She did not know when Wu Xiong had appeared beside her. She was in a daze and did not notice him. Wu Xiong also looked at her silently, his face dark and gloomy. He didn't expect that even with so many people working together, they still couldn't kill Yu Qianqiu. His plan to assassinate Yu Qianqiu without anyone knowing had actually caused such a huge commotion. It was truly beyond his expectations. The people over there shouldn't have made such a big mistake. Otherwise, no one would have an easy time. He asked himself this question more than once. However, this was not what worried him the most. What worried him the most was that Yu Qianqiu actually had the token of the Emperor of the Underworld. Without a doubt, the matter would be blown out of proportion. Once the token of the Emperor of the Underworld was revealed, it would be impossible not to attract the attention of the Immortal Emperor. Fortunately, he received news from the other side that the matter had been resolved and that there was no need to investigate further. However, the other side was also urging him to leave the Immortal Palace as soon as possible. Otherwise he might be in danger. However, Wuxia knew that if there really was danger he would not be able to leave even if he wanted to, since he was already being watched. Therefore he mustered up his courage and went to the Immortal Palace to seek forgiveness from the Immortal Emperor, Jin Tai. He said that his father-in-law had used his name to collude with a group of people to seek revenge on Xianxia in the underworld. He was guilty of negligence and asked the Immortal Emperor to punish him. In the end, the Immortal Emperor Jin Tai said that the ignorant were not guilty. A mere Xianxia was not as valuable as the life of his external affairs Grand Commander. However, he did not want this to happen a second time. Wuxia heaved a sigh of relief and thanked him profusely. Although it seemed like he was safe for the time being, his heart was still stretched taut. He was prepared to find a suitable opportunity to leave as soon as possible. He had just returned from the Immortal Palace when he saw this scene. His gaze fell upon the jade archive in Mu Tianjiao's hands. He sighed softly and said, "If I had known this would happen, I wouldn't have had people deliver the news from the outside world to you every day." Mu Tianjiao raised her head with tears streaming down her face. She looked at him and choked with sobs. "You knew all along?" News travels slower in the underworld than in the immortal realm. When the news spreads in the immortal realm. Wuxia walked up to her and patted her shoulder in consolation. "The news from the Immortal Palace arrived a few days earlier than you did. I've been thinking about how to break the news to you. I'm also very sad that something has happened to my father-in-law. However, the dead are dead and the living have to look forward. My condolences, madam." As expected, he went to seek revenge on Xianxia. "I've been worried. I told him that he was no match for Xianxia, but he wouldn't listen." Mu Tianjiao suddenly stood up and grabbed Wuxia's hand. She lost control of her emotions and asked, "Who did it? Who killed my father? Those people had no grudge against my father. Why would they want to kill him? Was it Xianxia who did it?" Wuxia did not know how to answer her. The public news in Twilight City was that another group of people from the underworld had killed Mu Bing, but he knew in his heart that he was afraid that Mu Bing had not experienced such a big scene. He was afraid that he would be implicated if things got out of hand, so he found some reliable people to cooperate with Mu Bing. Those people would not kill Mu Bing at all. In fact, the people involved in this matter knew very well that at that time Xianxia was outside the dungeon. There was no one else in the dungeon who would kill Mu Bing except for Xianxia. However, he could not say such words now. He only deeply regretted agreeing to Mu Bing in the first place. Wuxia looked at Mu Tianjiao and sighed slightly in his heart. The reason why he was jealous was that he really cared about this woman. Otherwise, he would not have done such an impulsive thing. According to the news from the other side, it should not be Xianxia. Xianxia was locked up alone in a dungeon at that time. It is unlikely that he would have the opportunity to kill father-in-law. This has been confirmed by the army of Onyx. Wuxia said helplessly. "But I saw the news that Xianxia broke out with my father's head." Mu Tianjiao went straight to the point and cried intermittently. Since he could break out of the dungeon, it means that the dungeon could not trap him. It means that he had the opportunity to kill my father. What's more, he has the token of the Emperor of the Underworld in his hand. He can command the army of Onyx. Who knows if the army of Onyx is cooperating with him to put on a show. This woman was as smart as ever. She saw the suspicious point at once. Wuxia sighed in his heart. He really did not know what to say. He could only grab her hand and comfort her. "Don't worry. The truth will come to light one day." He originally wanted to say something about punishing the culprit, but when he thought of the terrifying Emperor of the Underworld standing behind Xianxia, he really did not know if he would have the opportunity to settle the score with Xianxia. After a period of sadness, Mu Tianjiao wiped away her tears and revealed the strong expression that she had when she was supporting the Four Links Chamber of Commerce. She directly knelt before Wuxia. Wuxia was startled and quickly helped her up. "Madam, what are you doing?" Seeing that she could no longer kneel, Mu Tianjiao said decisively, "My abilities are really limited and I'm really powerless to do anything about the netherworld. I beg the great commander to help me find my father's body in the netherworld and bury it." This. Wuxia seemed to be in a difficult position. Mu Tianjiao bit her lip. "If it is really difficult, then forget it." Sigh. Wuxia let out a long sigh. He took out a box made of jade from his storage bracelet and gently placed it on the stone table. He said helplessly, "The people of the Dark Nether Army have searched for father-in-law's body, but they couldn't find it." Xianxia asked the people of the Heartless Palace to deliver father-in-law's head. "It's inside." He was not lying. At that time Lu Lin of the Onyx Army had considered that Mu Bing was the father-in-law of Wu Xiong, the great commander of external affairs of the Immortal Palace, and had really sent people to the collapsed ground to search for Mu Bing's body. In fact, no one knew that Mu Bing had been dragged several hundred meters underground by Xianxia and killed. His headless corpse had been cut into pieces and buried deep underground. Naturally, it was impossible to find him at such a depth of several hundred meters. Mu Tianjiao opened the jade box with trembling hands. Mu Bing's twisted head was lying inside. It was obvious that he had suffered a lot before his death. Fortunately, the corpse of an immortal wouldn't rot so easily in a short period of time. Otherwise, it would be impossible to see who it was. Mu Tianjiao's tears fell silently again. She bit her lips until blood came out and forcefully controlled her emotions. She stared at the bloody and empty eyes on Mu Bing's head and said, "My father didn't have that much of a grudge with those people. They didn't have to kill him, chop off his head and gouge out his eyes. If they didn't have a deep grudge, they wouldn't have done such a thing." Chapter 1052. Mu Tianjiao's trembling hand reached into the box and touched Mu Bing's cheek. When her fingers swept past the blood-stained right eye socket, she said in a trembling voice, "This is a sword wound. When that person used a sword to gouge out my father's right eye, he must have said, 'Arrogant.'" When her finger slid down to the blood-stained left eye socket, she murmured, "He must have said, 'looking down on others.'" She already had a vague outline of her father's murderer in her mind. Based on her understanding of that person, she guessed that the words he said were roughly the same as what the murderer himself had said during the torture. She slowly lifted Mu Bing's head and was about to hold it in her arms when she suddenly discovered that there was a wound on Mu Bing's lips. If she hadn't accidentally discovered it, she wouldn't have noticed it. It was covered by the blood on his lips. She opened Mu Bing's mouth with trembling hands and immediately smelled a strong, slightly rancid smell of blood. She saw that in the empty mouth, his tongue had been crushed and not a single tooth could be found intact. The sack was a ball in his mouth. It was obvious that someone had stabbed a sword into his mouth and tortured him. Mu Bing, who was standing to the side, was also slightly shocked. He didn't expect that there was such a secret in his mouth. He didn't know what Mu Bing had said to provoke Xianxia to do such a cruel thing. His head was chopped off, his eyes were dug out, and his tongue was crushed. "Ah!" Mu Tianjiao suddenly cried out in pain and fainted on the spot. Wu Xiong was shocked and quickly supported her. He pressed a palm on her head to dispel the anger in her heart. After a while, she finally woke up and said anxiously, "My condolences, madam. We will take revenge sooner or later. Don't damage your health because of anger." Mu Tianjiao lay in his arms, tears streaming down her face as she smiled bitterly. "I told you that this person wasn't simple and he had no enmity with us. I told you not to go against him, but why didn't you listen to me? If you hadn't chased him to the underworld, you wouldn't have been killed." Wu Xiong grabbed Mu Bing's head from her bosom and put it back into the jade box. He frowned and said, "From Madam's words, could it be Xianxia's doing? It's clear that there's a deep hatred between them to do such a thing. Father has you backing him up. Even if he had enemies in the past, most people wouldn't dare to do anything to him now, let alone go to the underworld to kill him. Among Father's enemies, Xianxia is the only one who has the ability to commit murder in the netherworld. Xianxia is a vindictive person. Who else could it be but him?" Mu Tianjiao deduced and locked onto the real culprit. "So Xianxia is a despicable person in her heart. Looks like I misunderstood her." Wu Xiong looked at her speechlessly. After a moment of silence, he said in a low voice, "Don't worry. I will avenge father-in-law sooner or later." Mu Tianjiao neither agreed nor objected. She struggled to her feet and stored the jade box into her storage bracelet. She looked at Wu Xiong with a bitter smile and said, "I want to bring my father's head back to the Four Links Chamber of Commerce and bury it with my mother. Now that father is dead, the Four Links Merchant Guild has no one to oversee it. I want to go back and take over the Four Links Merchant Guild and continue to operate it." In the attic of the Netherworld's forest, the scholar was holding a brush and writing a few words on the silk cloth on the desk. The words were black on the white cloth, and after writing a few words he couldn't help but mutter a few more words. The words were scattered on the paper, mostly fate or heavenly Tao. Looking at his frown, it seemed to be quite troublesome for him. A ray of silver light entered through the window and the 1,000 soldiers in silver armor appeared. Seeing the scholar's expression, he was slightly stunned. After walking to the side and reading the words, he smiled and didn't disturb him. However, the scholar sighed and said, "What are you laughing at?" "Nothing much." The 1,000 soldiers in silver armor cupped his hands and changed the topic. "I found some information regarding you, Xianxia. Someone saw him and Grey Cloud Exen hiding in the body of a river clam called Xinyu. They took the water route and went against the current of the Netherworld River. I don't know where they are going. Therefore, I contacted some friends in the Netherworld River's water tribe and asked them to help me investigate. In the end, they really found that the river clam was running for its life in the Netherworld River. I reckon that Yu Qianqiu and Grey Cloud Exian are still in its body." Running for their life? Could it be that someone from the Netherworld River's water tribe is chasing after them? The scholar raised his brush and said subconsciously. The person who found them only said that they were running for their life. I don't think that's the case. They should be in a hurry for something. The 1,000 soldiers in silver armor analyzed and said, if the Netherworld River's water tribe is really chasing after them, then they shouldn't be running for their life in the Netherworld River. They should be running for their life on land. If someone is chasing after them on land, they don't need to be afraid. Yu Qianqiu has the token of the Emperor of the Netherworld. He can mobilize the army of the Netherworld along the way to protect them at any time. Normally, no one would dare to touch them. Why would they need to run for their life? Token. The scholar was slightly startled. Speaking of the token, he couldn't help but think of what the Saintess of the Netherworld had said. Yu Qianqiu didn't even know that it was the token of the Emperor of the Netherworld. Could it be that he scared himself when he took out the token of the Emperor of the Netherworld? Thinking of this, the scholar felt that it was highly possible. He couldn't help but smile faintly and said, "Did you find any signs of where they were going?" They were very careful in the Netherworld River. They tried their best to avoid places with people or many people. They kept going against the current and didn't seem to have any intention of stopping. Before we came, we received a message from our friends from the Netherworld River's water tribe. They said that they would probably enter the endless horizon along the Netherworld River in a few days. The 1,000 soldiers in silver armor said. Endless horizon? What are they going to do there? The scholar asked in surprise. The 1,000 soldiers in silver armor spread out his hands helplessly and said, "They are so sneaky. I don't know what they are going to do." For a moment, the two famous big shots in the Netherworld couldn't figure out what they were doing. The scholar put down the pen in his hand and walked around the table in the attic. Suddenly, he stopped at the window and said, "1,000 soldiers, ask your friends from the Netherworld River's water tribe to keep a close eye on them. Tell them to contact me at any time. I'm going out for a while." After saying this, he turned into a white light and flashed across the pitch-black night sky at an incredible speed. He quickly disappeared into the distant horizon. The 1,000 soldiers in silver armor was stunned. He didn't have the time to say, yes. He looked at the words written on the table and pinched his chin as he said suspiciously, "Destiny, heaven's law? It doesn't seem like they are expressing their feelings. Why did they give the token of the Emperor of the Netherworld to Yu Qianqiu and then pursue it? What does he want?" Shaking his head, he couldn't figure it out. Then he also flashed out. Just as the two big shots in the Netherworld Royal Palace said, there was indeed an escaping clam in the Netherworld River. It was a huge clam that had lived for millions of years. With 2 people in his stomach, Xinyu kept dodging in the Netherworld River. Since he knew that the token of the Emperor of the Netherworld in Yu Qianqiu's hand was fake, he was more afraid than Yu Qianqiu and Grey Cloud Exen. What kind of person was the Emperor of the Netherworld? The Emperor could kill him with a flick of his finger. His millions of years of experience told him that it was not shameful to be humble and cowardly. It was best to stay alive. In his smooth stomach, Yu Qianqiu used the meatball in his stomach as a pillow and slept soundly. In the beginning he pretended to be calm and pretended to sleep. But in the end he got over it. Anyway, what was going to happen would happen. He would deal with it as it came. It was useless to worry. He had to deal with it calmly. As soon as his tense nerves relaxed, he really fell asleep. He even snored from time to time. He slept like a log. It had been a long time since he had such a relaxed sleep. He didn't know where he was in his dreams. Sometimes he dreamed that he was caught by the subordinates of the Emperor of the Netherworld. But when he was locked in a cage, he found that he was in a prison in his previous life. There were prison guards in uniform walking around in front of him. So he asked the prison guard to get him a cigarette. The prison guard was wearing a big cap, but he said in Grey Cloud Xian's voice, "Do you want me to choke you to death with the smoke?" He immediately cursed loudly. As he was cursing, he was suddenly escorted out of the prison. As a result, he found that he had been escorted into a magnificent palace by the police. The scholarly emperor of the underworld stood high above him, smiling sinisterly at him and baring his hideous fangs, as if he was about to skin and swallow him alive. He tried his best to see the other party's face clearly, but it was blurry and he couldn't see it clearly. In the end, he didn't care anymore and teleported back to Utopia. He realized that he was driving a sports car on the highway. He was driving Ji Wu, who was dressed in sexy clothes. He told Ji Wu arrogantly, "We've taken out the money we left in the Swiss bank. We can live comfortably for the rest of our lives." Suddenly, dark clouds appeared in the sky. Grey Cloud Xian's old face suddenly appeared in the sky. He stared at them in the car and snorted coldly, "Do you want money or your life?" He looked like he was robbing them. The most terrifying thing was that Ji Wu suddenly turned around to look at him. She had a beautiful face, but she said in the same voice as Grey Cloud Xian, "Do you want money or your life?" In the end, he woke up with a start. He suddenly sat up and looked at his surroundings. He immediately heaved a sigh of relief and fell back down. He waved his hand at Grey Cloud Xian, who was staring at him with a twitching expression. "Old song. I had a nightmare just now. You were talking everywhere in the dream. It gave me a fright." "Nightmare? You smiled and asked for cigarettes and you withdrew money from Switzerland to live comfortably. You call that a nightmare?" Grey Cloud Xian said with a mocking expression. He couldn't help but exchange a few words with Yu Qianqiu, who was talking in his sleep. Yu Qianqiu immediately jumped up like a spring. He pointed at Grey Cloud Xian and exclaimed, "How did you know? You even know about Switzerland? Faster thief. Did you transmigrate here too?" "Transmigrate here? I flew here, okay?" Grey Cloud Xian sneered and said, "You talk a lot in your sleep. It's hard for me not to know. I say you're really broad-minded. You're already in this state, yet you can still sleep and have sweet dreams?" Yu Qianqiu was stunned. He had been talking in his sleep. He could talk in his sleep. He was slightly shocked. He didn't say any secrets that couldn't be exposed, right? It seemed like he couldn't sleep in front of strangers anymore. It was too dangerous. He wanted to ask Grey Cloud Xian what else he had said. Suddenly, Xin Yu's voice came. "Everyone be careful. We're about to enter the Netherworld River in the endless horizon." Chapter 1053. The two who were bickering pricked up their ears at the same time to listen to the movements outside. They looked at each other and saw the nervousness in each other's eyes. They stopped talking, afraid that something unexpected would happen. However, they seemed a little lost amidst their nervousness. Did they reach the endless horizon so smoothly? According to Xin Yu, the Netherworld River was the same as the land. It was also ruled by powerful factions. The long journey was full of danger and accidents could happen at any time. The two were mentally prepared for the worst. However, what made them feel strange was that they reached the endless horizon without any danger. Someone even slept the entire way. Compared to Xin Yu's explanation, the two felt that it was a little unbelievable. In fact, even Jiu Yu himself felt a little baffled, let alone the two of them. Since when had the Netherworld River basin become so peaceful? Where did all those fellows who blocked the road, robbed, killed, bullied the weak and committed all sorts of crimes go? Everything had its cause and effect. In fact, Xin Yu's cautiousness, or rather timidity, and familiarity with this route were also objective reasons for being able to reach this place smoothly. Most importantly, due to the intervention of the Netherworld Emperor's guards, the Silver Armor Army, the Silver Armor Army's friends in the Netherworld River were not weak either. With these powerhouses' forces secretly monitoring their journey, those who had ill intentions along the way would dispel their evil thoughts after discovering them. This was equivalent to providing protection for them in disguise. This was the real internal reason. Yu Qianqiu and Songyun Xian held their breaths and listened attentively to the movements outside. It would be a lie to say that they did not want to go out and take a look. Even the Netherworld cultivators did not dare to step into the punishment land of the Netherworld, let alone the people from the immortal world. The two of them wanted to see the true appearance of the endless horizon. With this experience, it would be an enviable qualification to show off. However, no one had the guts to go out and take a look. Endless horizon. Those who heard this name for the first time would probably associate it with darkness. In fact, in a place as dark as the Netherworld, there was probably no place brighter than it. It was definitely not a lie. Almost half of the vast endless horizon was fused with the bright and wriggling red light, and it was steaming hot. Coming here, one would realize that one was like a freshly baked bun. On a narrow section of the Netherworld River, red light enveloped the river, dyeing the entire river red. On both sides of the river Styx, there was a row of soldiers in red armor. Their clothes and armor were bright red, and each of them gave off a vicious aura, as if they had charged out from blood and fire. Not far behind them there was a hot red mist rising into the night sky. They stood quietly by the river as if waiting for something. One of them, be it in terms of appearance or temperament, was clearly different from the other red-armored soldiers. Although he was also wearing red armor, his armor was like the shell of a beetle. It was extremely close-fitting and had sharp edges. He was tall and sturdy with a layer of short hair sticking to his scalp. His face was thick and his eyes were as round as copper bells. He had the aura of a tiger-lion beast king. Both his shoulders and the upper half of his body were wrapped in red iron chains that were as thick as a thumb. They were like thick armor that was stretched taut on his muscular chest. It was as if the two bulging muscles on his chest could snap the iron chains with a crack if he exerted force. Suddenly, an undetectable wave came from the night sky. The tall and sturdy man with the red chains frowned slightly. Then he waved his hand, and 100 of the red-armored soldiers on both sides of the river Styx immediately scuttled into the river Styx and quickly disappeared into the water. The giant clam that was almost sticking to the bottom of the river Styx suddenly came to a halt. Zhou realized that the path in front of him had been cut off by the hundreds of red-armored soldiers. Oh no! It's the Purgatory Army that controls the endless horizon. They've blocked our path. Zhou panicked and told the two people in his body. Yu Qianchou and Songyun Exin quickly stood up. Songyun Exin stared at Yu Qianchou and sneered. What's going to happen is going to happen. It's all your fault. I've fallen into the pit with you. Damn it. What's the hurry? Zhou, turn around. Let's hide for a while first. They might not be targeting us. Yu Qianchou waved his hand and shouted. Zhou had the same intention. He did not hesitate to turn around. In the end, he realized that 100 red-armored soldiers had appeared out of nowhere and cut off their path of retreat. Zhou looked around in fear. In the end, he realized that he could not see through the cultivation of any of the red-armored soldiers. Now the only way out was to leave through the water. However, the endless horizon was the main camp of the Purgatory Army. It would be even more dangerous to leave the river Styx. It was impossible to escape. What should we do? What should we do? The path ahead and back have been cut off by the Purgatory Army. We have nowhere to run. Zhou was completely panicking. Why are you panicking? You're from the river Styx. They won't dare to do anything to you. Be careful. They won't make things difficult for you. Yu Qianchou tried to make his tone as calm as possible. He patted his plump body in the clam and laughed. Zhou, whether we can pass this time depends on you. Zhou thought about it and agreed with him. He was from the river Styx, so the Purgatory Army would not do anything to him. However, when he slowly approached the soldiers in front of him, his stomach still palpitated with fear. Hence, he forced himself to calm down and asked with a smile, I'm from the water tribe of the Netherworld River. I wonder if you can make way for me and let me pass. A red-armored soldier floating in the water slowly floated forward and pushed his palm to stop him. We're pursuing a fugitive. Regardless of whether you're in the sky or in the water, you have to be checked. If there's nothing wrong, we'll naturally let you pass. Zhou was stunned. He plucked up his courage and asked, You're from the land. Since when did you have the right to set up a checkpoint in the river Styx to check the river Styx? That's not something you should worry about. We've naturally informed the overlord of this water body. The red-armored soldier pointed at Zhou's huge body in the water and said, I see that your clam is huge. It's big enough to hide a few people inside. Please open it and let us search. If there's nothing wrong, we'll immediately let you pass. Zhou was speechless, but he did not dare to open the clam for them to search. While he was panicking and hesitating, the red-armored soldier suddenly shouted, Cooperate quickly. Otherwise, don't blame us for using force. The two people hiding in the clam looked at each other. They had clearly heard the movements outside. Although the people searching outside did not say who the fugitive was, the two of them felt that they were the ones being captured. Old Song, you're an expert. What do you think we should do? Xianxia humbly asked with telepathy. You respect me as an expert now? Grey Cloud Xen rolled his eyes, but now was not the time to fight. He replied telepathy, with Zhou Yu's cultivation, if anything happens, we won't be able to break out. Hiding outside is not a solution. If anything happens, are you confident that you can help me and Zhou Yu break out? Xianxia asked cautiously with telepathy. Grey Cloud Xen thought for a while and slowly replied, I can't say for sure since I can't see the situation outside. But I'm sure there are many experts in purgatory. Plus, the endless sea is vast. Even if I can break out for a while, I'm afraid I won't be able to resist a large number of experts. If I'm alone, maybe it won't be difficult to break out. Maybe they're not here to capture us, Old Song. Just be prepared for the worst. After Xianxia said that, he suddenly patted Xinyu and said in a clear voice, Xinyu, open it and let us out. Zhou Yu, who was in a dilemma, opened the giant shell. Two people flashed out. Zhou Yu also turned into human form. The three of them stood side by side. Xianxia looked back and forth, then cupped his hands towards the red-armored soldier who came out of the formation and said with a smile, I wonder what happened that caused the Purgatory army to make such a big fuss. The man glanced at Songyun Xin and Xianxia and said, 2 criminals have escaped from the endless horizon. We are currently searching for them. Then he pointed at the two and said, I think the two of you are very suspicious. Please come back with us for a while. If there's nothing, we will let you go. So the criminals escaped from the endless sea. Hearing this, the three looked at each other and heaved a sigh of relief. It has nothing to do with us. Xianxia immediately laughed. General, I think you're mistaken. We are from the celestial world. We can't be criminals that escaped from the endless sea. Take a closer look. The red-armored soldier covered up the loophole in his words without hesitation. Some of the criminals in the endless sea are from the celestial world. The 2 escaped criminals are from the celestial world. Is such a coincidence? Xianxia was stunned. Then he smiled bitterly. General, we can cooperate with you. But how long will it take? Why ask so many questions? You'll know when you get there. The red-armored soldier snorted. Don't make us use force. The three looked at each other. Xianxia had no choice but to take one step at a time. He said to Zhou Yu, this is none of your business. Wait for us in the river Styx. Zhou Yu nodded and watched the two of them leave with the red-armored soldiers. Suddenly, Xinyu looked around and immediately realized that something was wrong. The red-armored soldiers that were blocking his way had all left. He could leave at any time. Not to mention him, even Grey Cloud Xen and Xianxia, who had leapt out of the water along with the red-armored soldiers, exchanged a glance and also realized that something was wrong. It didn't make sense for the fugitives to retreat just because they encountered the two of them, right? The two of them immediately became vigilant. The heat wave that came toward them, the dark sky was almost dyed red. The red-hot mist that rose from both sides of the river, and the miserable screams that came from afar made the two of them even more afraid. A burly man with a red iron chain wrapped around his upper body stood on the shore of the river Styx, looking at them like a mountain. Both of their gazes were focused on him. This man can't be underestimated. He has the cultivation of the middle stage of the Underworld Emperor. I'm afraid he will be a difficult character to deal with, Zhou Yu said secretly. Needless to say, Xianxia couldn't move his eyes away when he saw the man with the red iron chain wrapped around his upper body. He was a bit surprised. He immediately recalled the wall carvings in the underground palace when he first met the saintess of the underworld in the East Holy Land. Besides the carvings of the Underworld Emperor who was dressed like a scholar, there were also carvings of the 12 underworld generals on both sides of the wall. One of them looked exactly like this man. Even their expressions were very similar. Thinking of what Songyun Xian had just said, Xianxia immediately let out a breath of cold air, and he secretly sent a voice transmission. You guessed right, this person is indeed difficult to deal with. If I'm not wrong, this person is one of the 12 netherworld generals that shake the netherworld. Old Song. Why do I feel that something is amiss? Could it be that he was sent here to deal with you? One of the 12 underworld generals? Zhou Yu was shocked. Even though he hadn't seen these 12 figures before, he had heard about them. They were the famous old experts of the underworld. They were already experts in the middle stage of the underworld emperor more than 100,000 years ago. Their outstanding military exploits were enough to intimidate the heroes of the underworld. They were the 12 most capable generals of the underworld emperor Bai Qi. They had even followed the underworld emperor Bai Qi to fight the infamous Thousand Swords demon monarch. Those who survived the battle and escaped alive were even more extraordinary. An ordinary expert in the middle stage of the underworld emperor couldn't compare to them. How do you know he is one of the 12 underworld generals? Have you seen him before? Songyun Exen secretly transmitted his voice, but his gaze never left that person. That person's gaze, which seemed to be solid, rapidly pressed towards his gaze. His ferocious aura, which had been through a long period of slaughter, forced Songyun Exen to not dare to look directly at that person. He quickly shifted his gaze. Yu Qianzhou replied secretly, I have seen the portraits of the 12 underworld generals of the underworld before. This man is one of them. Zhou Yu and Yu Qianzhou looked left and right at the red-armored soldiers who had come out of the underworld river. He said secretly, they actually sent out the underworld generals to investigate. I'm afraid there is something fishy about this. The two of them were still standing there whispering to each other. The man who had been talking to Yu Qianzhou in the water had already dashed to the side of the ferocious man who had red iron chains wrapped around his upper body. He reported something. The ferocious man said in a deep voice, bring him here. Yu Qianzhou and Zhou Yu were immediately chased over by the group of red-armored soldiers. They stood in front of the ferocious man. The ferocious man ignored Zhou Yu and stared at Yu Qianzhou, sizing him up. Yu Qianzhou's heart thumped, his stomach grumbled, and he cursed his ancestors in his heart. Zhou Yu, who was at the side, frowned slightly. After some hesitation, he cupped his fists and said, I am the great consecrator of the celestial realm's passionless palace, Zhou Yu. May I ask if you are one of the underworld emperor's 12 underworld generals, the red-armored war army? The ferocious man was slightly stunned. He looked a little surprised when he turned to look at Zhou Yu, as if he didn't expect Zhou Yu to recognize him. He shouted in a deep voice, my war army has lived in the savage lands for a long time. Back then I had only met Wang Qing of the Passionless Palace. I have never heard of any great consecrator or little consecrator. Why have you barged into my endless horizons? Could it be that you have some ulterior motives? Chapter 1054. Damn it. Aren't you accusing us wrongly? Who would want to come to your endless netherworld horizon? It was you who forced us out of the river Styx, and now it's us who are up to no good. Yu Qianzhou was speechless, but he couldn't figure out this legendary figure's temper, so he didn't dare to be too presumptuous. The two uneasy fellows looked at each other. The other had already admitted that he was the underworld general under the underworld emperor, the red armor warrior. But what puzzled the two was that the other didn't know who Songyun Exen was. Didn't that mean that the other didn't know what happened in Twilight City? It seemed that the other didn't set up this checkpoint to target them. Yu Qianzhou immediately wanted to test him. He cupped his fists and bowed, saying, I am Yu Qianzhou, the head of the Underworld Chamber of Commerce in the Immortal world. We are just passing through here on the river Styx. We definitely have no bad intentions. Please let us go, General. He wanted to see if the other had heard of him. If not, it would be easy to deal with him. The red armor warrior snorted. Even a nobody from the Immortal world dares to come here. How dare you say you don't have bad intentions? Guards. Arrest them and interrogate them. The red armor warriors surrounding the two immediately obeyed. Yu Qianzhou waved his hand, saying, wait. The other party didn't know him, so he wasn't afraid. He took out a black token and showed it to the red armor warrior, saying, who dares to touch me? Open your eyes and see what this is. Seeing him take out a fake underworld emperor's token, the corner of Songyun Exion's mouth twitched, but he naturally wouldn't expose it. Underworld emperor's token. The red armor warriors were moved when they saw the thing in his hand, and they were about to pay their respects. However, the red armor warrior waved his hand to stop them. He stared at the token in Yu Qianzhou's hand and said disapprovingly, I have followed the underworld emperor for so many years, and I have never heard of him giving the token to an outsider, let alone a small immortal world cultivator like you. Why do I feel that there is something wrong with this underworld emperor's token? The more I look at it, the more it looks like a fake. Songyun Exion's heart skipped a beat when he heard this. He felt as if he had fallen into an ice cave. This red-armored soldier was indeed a trusted subordinate of the Emperor of the Underworld. He could immediately tell that the token of the Emperor of the Underworld was fake. This was going to be a big problem. How could the other side let go of the person who faked the token of the Emperor of the Underworld? Grey Cloud Xian's right hand had already touched the storage bracelet on his left wrist, just in case. Bullshit. Xianxia almost panicked. He didn't expect the other party to say that. Although he had fooled Songyun Xin and Xinyu by saying that the token of the Underworld Emperor was fake in order to avoid their suspicion, he knew that the token of the Underworld Emperor was given to Yu Ji by the Saintess of the Underworld herself. It couldn't be fake. General, you can't speak carelessly. This is the genuine token of the Emperor of the Netherworld. How can you fake it? You better look carefully before you speak. Otherwise, it will be a great disrespect to the Emperor of the Netherworld. Xianxia shouted. At this moment, Songyun Xin only wanted to say 5 words to him. Stubborn. There's no need to argue whether it's real or fake. I have someone here who can tell whether the token of the Emperor of the Netherworld in your hand is real or fake. The red-armored soldier looked at him disdainfully and sneered. Take the 2 of them away. Wait. Xianxia shouted. You really don't know your place. Do you still want to resist? The red-armored soldier's gaze turned cold. We can go with you to verify whether it's real or fake. What if it's real? Xianxia was very confident. If the token in his hand was real, there was no need to be afraid. You dare to bargain with me? You must be tired of living. If you have the real token of the Emperor of the Netherworld in your hand, no one will dare to do anything to you. You can do whatever you want in the endless horizon. According to the red-armored soldier's temper, he wouldn't be so patient. He would have captured the 2 of them and interrogated them. However, he was here under orders to put on a show, so he couldn't do anything. Xianxia shouted. I'll go with you. I want to see who has the guts to distort the truth and say that the token in my hand is fake. Take them away. The red-armored soldier shouted. Wait. Xianxia tried to delay again. This time the red-armored soldier's expression was really bad. No one dared to disobey him again and again. He immediately said in a deep voice, What do you want again? I have a friend in the Netherworld River. I have to bring him along. Xianxia didn't care whether he agreed or not. He turned and shouted at the surface of the Netherworld River, Zhu, come out. Zhu heard their conversation clearly from below. He flashed out of the Netherworld River with a pale face. He had no choice. There was a restriction on his body. He had to follow even if he didn't want to. Actually, Xianxia didn't want Xinyu to take the risk either. However, the green fire pearl had been planted in Xinyu's body. If the 2 of them were placed too far apart, it wouldn't be a problem for a short period of time. However, if the 2 of them were placed too far apart, they would immediately lose control and Xinyu would definitely die. He didn't know where the red-armored soldier would take them to verify the authenticity of the Netherworld Emperor's token. He decided to bring Zhou along for the sake of safety. Just like that, the 3 of them were surrounded by the Purgatory Army and flew to the depths of the Netherworld River. Along the way, Grey Cloud Xin couldn't help but ask, Xianxia, the token in your hand is obviously fake. You still dare to follow them. Once the matter is exposed, we will be trapped in the depths of the endless sea cliff. It will be even more difficult for us to escape. What are you trying to do? Don't worry. The quality of the Netherworld Emperor's token is very high. Unless it's the Netherworld Emperor himself, no one will be able to tell it's real. I don't believe that anyone would dare to attack someone with the Underworld Emperor's command medallion without knowing if it's real or fake. How about it? You can rest assured, Xianxia said confidently. I hope so. Grey Cloud Xin could only sigh. He felt like he was stuck in a quagmire and couldn't get out of it. However, he had already made up his mind. Once he was at death's door and had nowhere to run, he would kill Xianxia first to avenge his grandson and himself. Otherwise, he wouldn't be able to die in peace. After coming to the Netherworld, they had long heard of the endless sea cliff. Unfortunately, they didn't have the chance to see it. Even Zhou only dared to look at it secretly from the Netherworld River. Now that they were overlooking the endless sea cliff from the sky, the 3 of them were still shocked and terrified. So this was the true face of the endless sea cliff. Scorching red molten lava continuously bubbled up from the ground like a spring, slowly flowing in all directions on the vast land. It was such a shocking scene. The lava field that was as wide as the sea was dyed red and had been rising for many years. Under the red mist, there were crisscrossing paths on the lava field like fields. Io. Io. The sorrowful and miserable voices of men and women mixed together and echoed endlessly. Countless men and women were completely naked, stepping on the scorching ground barefoot like slaves, working together to pull the huge iron chains on their shoulders and hands. The other end of the iron chains dragged something that looked like a sieve, filtering something that had gushed out of the ground along with the lava. There were many soldiers of the Purgatory Army in the surroundings who were holding long whips that were covered in thorns. Once they discovered someone slacking off, they would lash out with a hoo sound. Along with the laceration of flesh, miserable screams would resound. The slaves who had been whipped and were physically weak were immediately whipped into the boiling lava by the long whips. They wailed and screamed incessantly in the lava, and their bodies sank into the lava while emitting black smoke. A soldier in charge of law enforcement took out a wooling mirror and shone a beam of white light at the corpses that had sunk into the lava. Immediately, a ray of green light entered the mirror. This kind of scene could be seen at any time during the flight, causing Xianxia and the other two to feel their blood run cold. In the vast lava field there were also hills and mountainous areas. When they flew over, they could see countless naked men and women mining in the open in the mountains. Similarly, they could also see soldiers carrying long whips mercilessly executing people. Miserable screams still lingered in their ears. What was even more eye-opening was that they could occasionally see neatly dressed women being dragged and thrown into the mountains by the Purgatory Army. It was obvious that they had just been caught after committing some crime. Once such women were thrown, the busy male slaves in the surroundings immediately stopped what they were doing and swarmed over. Amidst the women's screams, their ragged clothes were torn to shreds, and they were stripped in the blink of an eye. A group of dirty men were no different from beasts. They held down the fair-skinned women and rushed to rape them one after another. No one knew how long this would last. What was strange was that the Purgatory soldiers, who were supposed to be strict in law enforcement, turned a deaf ear to them and allowed these men to do as they pleased. It inevitably made people feel that this was the time for these male slaves to rest. The unimaginable scenes they saw along the way made the three of them shudder with fear. The soldiers of the Purgatory Army did not treat the prisoners here as humans at all. In their eyes, they were no different from beasts and pigs. They endlessly tortured the prisoners using all kinds of strange methods, turning this place into a living purgatory that was too horrible to look at. One thing was obvious. Those naked slaves either had their cultivation sealed or had their cultivation crippled. They were forced to do all kinds of heavy labor with their pure physical strength. Also, the lava that emerged from the ground had a suppressive effect on meditation cultivators. It was easy to imagine the suffering they had to endure in such an environment. Xin Yu's uncomfortable expression as he flew in the air due to the high temperature. However, what made the three of them feel strange was that these purgatory soldiers were also meditation cultivators, but they did not seem to be affected by the lava at all. The three of them easily suspected that the red armor they were wearing could help them resist the torture of the lava. After flying for half a day, a towering mountain stood like a ferocious giant beast in the red light of the lava in the distance. Flying closer to take a look, the laborers at the foot of the mountain were as dense as ants. Clanking sounds could be heard incessantly as if they were forging something. In between, the familiar sound of caltrops and whips could be heard incessantly, and screams could be heard one after another. There were countless caves on the mountain with red-armored soldiers going in and out. The whole mountain was like a nest of red ants. As the three of them were observing carefully, the red-armored soldier had already flown to the top of the mountain, where there was a magnificent palace. The others followed closely and landed on the square in front of the palace. Standing on the top of the mountain and looking around quietly, they saw a sea of red light and a red fog rising noisily into the sky, looking magnificent. The miserable screams that kept coming from the foot of the mountain allowed the three of them to understand the meaning of this endless horizon. They understood why the Netherworld's punishment grounds could cause the Netherworld's cultivators to keep quiet out of fear. Presumably, no one would be willing to be sent here. The red-armored soldier glanced at the three of them and then looked at the roof of the palace. The three of them couldn't help but look at the roof. They saw a man dressed like a scholar in white standing on the roof with his hands clasped behind his back and bare feet, motionless with his back to the people on the square and his face to the vast red lava world. The red light filled the sky and his white robe fluttered in the wind. The three of them were stunned. Even though they had never seen the Emperor of the Underworld with their own eyes, they had heard that the Emperor of the Underworld liked to dress like a scholar in white for a long time. At this moment, they saw a scholar in white standing so leisurely on the roof of a palace in the endless horizon. It was self-evident what it meant. Could this man be the legendary Supreme Master of the Underworld who rarely came out? The Emperor of the Underworld? The three of them felt short of breath. It felt unreal and they didn't know if they were lucky or unlucky. Xianxia found that the back of this scholar in white was exactly the same as the back of the scholar he had seen in the wall sculpture in the underground palace in the Holy Land, where he had seen the Saintess of the Underworld for the first time. It was also the back of the scholar, as if the scholar in the wall sculpture had suddenly walked out of his mind. Under such circumstances, the three of them were certain without a doubt that this scholar in white with his back facing them was the Underworld Emperor who had awed the three realms, the Emperor of the Underworld by Qi. Grey Cloud Exen and Xianxia suddenly remembered what the red-armored soldier had said earlier. I have someone here who can tell whether the token of the Emperor of the Underworld in your hands is real or fake. The two of them instantly felt bitter when they thought about it. So the person he had mentioned was the Emperor of the Underworld by Qi. They had found the right person. Grey Cloud Exen and Shen Yu slowly turned their heads to look at Xianxia, their eyes filled with despair. The former even transmitted his voice to him resentfully. Xianxia, play with me. Why don't you play with me anymore? You can't play with me anymore. The Emperor of the Underworld is here. No one can escape this time. This old man has been fooled by you. You haven't seen the Emperor of the Underworld. Maybe he just looks like the Emperor of the Underworld. Xianxia said with a last shred of hope. Bolsh *. Grey Cloud Exayan immediately said this to him. The red-armored soldier flashed to the roof of the palace, bowed to the scholar in white and reported something. The people below couldn't hear a single word. This scene had undoubtedly extinguished the last shred of hope of Xianxia. Could there be another person in the endless horizon who could make the red-armored soldier bow to him respectfully? The scholar in white, who stood barefoot on the roof with his hands clasped behind his back, nodded slightly. The red-armored soldier immediately flashed back and stood in front of Xianxia. He said with a mocking expression, I have found you someone who can tell whether the token of the Emperor of the Underworld is real or fake. Show him the token. Chapter 1055. Xianxia choked and was speechless. It was said that those who had nothing to lose were not afraid of those who wore shoes, and this was used to describe those ruffians. However, if they knew that there was a hard and sharp nail in front of them, which ruffian would still dare to step on it? Zhou Yu lowered his head sadly. He had been cautious all his life. A small mistake had caused him to be doomed eternally. He wanted to cry but no tears came out. Songyun Exin wanted to say something but stopped himself. He knew that it was meaningless for him to intervene. With Emperor of the Underworld by Qi here, he had no hope of protecting Xianxia. Back then, the sect master's 3-in-1 sword drawing technique could not deal with Immortal Emperor Jin Tai, and Emperor of the Underworld by Qi was definitely not weaker than Immortal Emperor Jin Tai. How could he deal with him? He could only take one step at a time. If he was really in a desperate situation, he could only fight with his life on the line. If he could escape, he would escape. If not, there was nothing he could do. After all, he had already come this far and there was no way to retreat. The red-armored soldier crossed his arms in front of his chest, and the red chains wrapped around his body made an ear-piercing sound. He sneered and said, Why? You don't dare to? You win. Xianxia said ruthlessly. He took out the Emperor of the Underworld's token and flew up to the roof of the palace. He had wanted to slip back to Utopia and run, but he thought that the Emperor of the Underworld's token was a genuine gift from the Saintess of the Underworld. He could take a gamble. The Emperor of the Underworld couldn't possibly kill him without saying a word, right? It wouldn't be too late to escape if he realized that something was wrong. It wasn't his style to cry until he saw the coffin. Xianxia flew up to the roof and stood behind the scholar. He held the Emperor of the Underworld's token with both hands and bowed respectfully. Xianxia of the Immortal World greets the Emperor of the Underworld. Taking advantage of his free time, he glanced down at the foot of the mountain. He realized that the scenery at the foot of the mountain from this angle really made him feel like he was the ruler of the world. Lowering his head, he saw the fair and bare feet standing on the roof slowly turn around without a speck of dust on them. He immediately understood that the supreme of the underworld was sizing him up. His heart immediately thumped non-stop, and many past events flashed through his mind. Yan Zicheng met Lu Chongqing, the head of the Ong Kuangtsung sect, and joined the Ong Kuangtsung sect. He became a small disciple who was ridiculed. Later his master died and he was framed. After experiencing a series of events, he escaped with his life. After hiding outside for a long time and experiencing some things, he joined the #1 sect in the cultivation world, Fuxian Island. He was expelled from the sect and was hunted by various sections. Then, he became the disciple of the #1 expert in the world by Changchun, until he took charge of the demon domain and became the #1 expert in the human world. Finally, he founded the World Chamber of Commerce in the Immortal world. He had been through countless life and death situations along the way. In the past, he would never have dreamed that he would one day be able to stand face to face with the legendary emperor of the underworld in the three realms. He was able to achieve what he had today by walking step by step. He had experienced life and death so many times. What was there to be afraid of? He gritted his teeth and slowly raised his head to meet the gaze that was staring at him. What entered his eyes was a refined and handsome face with a slight smile. It was completely different from the sinister emperor of the underworld he had dreamed of. He couldn't help but be slightly stunned. Was this person really the emperor of the underworld who could make the three realms tremble? The scholar was also sizing up Yu Qianchou carefully. He wanted to see what kind of person the saintess of the underworld was talking about was. When he saw that there was no trace of fear in the other party's eyes when he raised his head to look at him, he couldn't help but nod slightly in his heart. Indeed, there was something extraordinary about an extraordinary person. It was rare for a cultivator with the cultivation of a minor immortal to not be afraid when he saw him. What he didn't know was that Yu Qianchou didn't even have the courage to raise his head to look at him. He only managed to raise his head after a torment in his heart. If he had looked at him with a murderous intent, it would be strange if Yu Qianchou wasn't afraid. Perhaps he wouldn't even be able to see Yu Qianchou's figure right now. Most importantly, he came with good intentions. That smile on his face was so harmless and he looked refined and handsome. Women would rush up and kiss him when they saw him. Who would be afraid? Yu Qianchou. This is the second time we've met. The scholar was the first to speak with a slight smile. It was the first time for Zhongyun Xian and Xinyu to meet the emperor of the underworld. They didn't expect him to be such a handsome young man with such an amiable smile. It was truly beyond their expectations. Subconsciously they felt a lot more at ease. Seeing that the emperor of the underworld had spoken, they couldn't hear a single word clearly. They guessed that there might be some sort of soundproofing barrier set up on the roof. The red-armored soldier was also stunned. He had never seen the emperor of the underworld being so amiable to a foreign cultivator, especially a celestial cultivator. Under normal circumstances, the emperor of the underworld would maintain at least some dignity in front of outsiders. He wouldn't act like this. Of course, based on his understanding of the emperor of the underworld, it would be a different story if he saw a beautiful woman. Yu Qianchou's brain worked quickly. However, he was at a loss for a long time. He couldn't remember when he had seen the emperor of the underworld, who was renowned throughout the three realms. He had a splitting headache, but he still couldn't remember. His memory couldn't be that bad, right? How could he forget someone like the emperor of the underworld by Qi? For a moment he didn't know how to answer. The emperor of the underworld said that they had met before. Could he say that he remembered wrongly? That this junior is ignorant. I really can't remember when I've seen you before. Yu Qianchou said with a toothache. He was afraid that the emperor of the underworld was testing him. He also didn't know what the emperor of the underworld's temper was like. Was he a smiling tiger? He could only stiffen his neck and wait for the situation. The scholar smiled faintly and said, "That's true. I could see you in front of the dragon transformation gate. With your cultivation you can't see me." Yu Qianchou was speechless. So he was referring to that time. Suddenly he felt the weight in his hands lighten. The emperor of the underworld's token had already floated to the emperor of the underworld's hand. His heart jumped and he was prepared to escape at any time. Below, Zhongyun Xian and Xinyu's expressions changed drastically. They were probably all done for this time. The scholar looked at the token over and over again and said faintly, "I personally carved the emperor of the underworld's token. There are only two sides. One side is on me and I'm prepared to use it to pass down orders at any time. The other side is given to the underworld saintess for protection. When the underworld saintess told me that she gave the underworld's token to you, I was a little surprised. Yu Qianzhou was surprised. Did the underworld saintess tell you that she gave the underworld's token to me? No matter how he listened to it, he felt that something was wrong. The underworld saintess had obviously given the token to Yuji, and it had nothing to do with him. How could he not understand the words of an expert? The scholar nodded slightly and said, she was trapped in the human world for a long time. She said that when she returned to the underworld, she realized that she was fated to meet you, so she gave this token to you. However, she didn't tell you that she gave you the token of the underworld. Yu Qianzhou was speechless. He slowly tilted his head to look at the rising red fog, a puzzled expression on his face. He believed that the Emperor of the Underworld had no need to lie to him. However, why did the Underworld Saintess say something that distorted the truth? From what the scholar had said, it seemed that the Underworld Saintess had intentionally concealed the fact that he was from the human world. Could it be that she was trying to protect him? But why was that? Could it be that she had fallen in love with him at first sight? But it seemed that his current appearance was not good enough for a woman to fall in love with him at first sight. Not long after the Underworld Saintess told me this, Jin Tai suddenly came to the royal palace of the underworld and asked me why I gave you the underworld's token. The scholar immediately told Yu Qianzhou what he had told Jin Tai that day. This was the reason why he didn't care about his status as the Emperor of the Underworld and asked someone to trick Yu Qianzhou into meeting him. He wanted to let Yu Qianzhou know that he had helped him before so that Yu Qianzhou would remember this big favor. What the hell were they doing? Yu Qianzhou scratched his head in confusion. He was no longer nervous, but he said with a wry smile, Emperor of the Underworld. This junior can't figure out why you helped me like this. It seems that this junior's ability is not worthy of your kindness. It's right that you can't figure it out. If I could figure it out, then I, the Emperor of the Underworld, would be too despicable to come here and curry favor with you. The scholar immediately laughed heartily. His thin white robe wrapped tightly around his body in the wind, giving him a feeling that he was floating in the air. He appeared to be exceptionally elegant and refined. This surprised Songyun Xen Jiuyu and the red-armored soldiers below, not knowing why the Emperor of the Underworld was so happy. He waved his hand disapprovingly, saying, You are too serious. It's not a kindness. Since the Underworld Saintess thinks so highly of you, how can I undermine her? Naturally, I have to do my best to help you. Otherwise, as an immortal, you dared to use my Underworld Emperor's token to show off outside, let alone help you block Jin Tai. Do you really think you can avoid my eyes and ears by hiding in the Underworld River? Once I give the order, how can the Water Tribe of the Underworld not give me face? If I want to deal with you, I can make it difficult for you to move an inch in the Underworld River at any time. If I want to catch you, it will be a piece of cake. Do you think you can hide until today? As he spoke, he laughed coldly and said, Actually, your movements in the Netherworld River have always been within my grasp. It's just a matter of time and place for me to catch you. Otherwise, why do you think the Purgatory Army coincidentally intercepted you in the Netherworld River? Do you really think you are catching a fugitive from the endless horizon? It's because I happened to come here for something. Thinking that the Underworld Saintess thinks so highly of you, I can't help but want to see why she thinks so highly of you. So I asked the soldiers to intercept you and bring you here. Do you think I can see just anyone? Although what he said was half true, the domineering aura of the Supreme Emperor of the Underworld was undoubtedly revealed in his words. He behaved like an emperor, using both kindness and power. It was enough to fool Yu Qianzhou without his knowledge. Yu Qianzhou wouldn't expect that the Emperor of the Underworld came here on purpose for him. Hearing this, Yu Qianzhou blushed with shame. He realized that the three of them had indeed thought too simply, thinking that they could avoid being caught by the Emperor of the Underworld by hiding in the water. Since the Emperor of the Underworld had been in charge of the Underworld for so many years, his relationship with the Water Tribe of the Underworld River was naturally not bad. If he, the Emperor of the Underworld, asked the Water Tribe of the Underworld River for him, how could they not give face to the Emperor of the Underworld for the sake of an insignificant celestial cultivator like him? It was guaranteed that a large group of people would surround and intercept him. I felt that there was something fishy about being intercepted in the Underworld River. So that's what happened. Yu Qianzhou smiled bitterly and rubbed his nose. He cupped his hands and said, I wonder how the Emperor of the Underworld is going to deal with us now? If I really wanted to deal with you, I wouldn't be meeting you here. Zhang Jun would have already killed you. Based on Zhang Jun's ability, the 3-in-1 sword drawing style of the Heartless Palace would not be able to stop him, unless Wang Qing himself used it. That Grey Cloud Xian is still not good enough. The scholar waved his hand and the token of the Emperor of the Underworld landed in Yu Qianchou's hand. He smiled faintly and said, "Since the Saintess has already given it to you, I have no reason to take it back. The Saintess has given you benefits, so I naturally can't be too stingy. In the future you can use this token to come to the Underworld Royal Palace to see me at any time. I will allow you to use the token of the Emperor of the Underworld to solve any problems you encounter in the Underworld. What do you think? The benefits I have given you won't be any worse than the Saintess's, right?" Ah. Yu Qianchou was stunned. He had never dreamed that this would be the outcome. He didn't dare to believe that this was real. Could it be that there was such a thing as a free lunch in this world? He quickly calmed down. He didn't believe that there was such a good thing. He cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your favor, Emperor of the Underworld. What does Emperor of the Underworld need this junior to do?" With the scholar's insight and experience, he could naturally tell what Jiang Yi was thinking. He smiled coldly and said, "Do you think that I am making a deal with you? In the 3 realms, if I want to do something, I only need to say the word and someone will do it. If I want something, someone will naturally deliver it to me. Do you think that with your current ability, you are qualified to be ordered around by me? I am only helping you because I am happy. Don't think too highly of yourself." "Damn it. You don't have to be so direct. You should at least give me some face." Yu Qianchou stood there awkwardly. When he thought about it, he felt that the scholar was right. The scholar didn't have anything he wanted, and his subordinates were as many as the clouds. He also had countless subordinates. Whatever he wanted to do, he could settle it with just a word. Yu Qianchou really wasn't qualified to be ordered around by the scholar. It seemed like he was indeed thinking too much. Seeing that Jiang Yi had already been convinced by him, the scholar felt it was funny. However, on the surface he asked calmly, "Let me ask you. What are you doing here instead of cultivating and improving your own cultivation?" Yu Qianchou immediately smiled bitterly and said, "Actually, this junior was forced to do so. Just as the Underworld Saintess said, this junior didn't know that this was the Underworld token. When I took it out, even I was shocked, thinking that I had gotten into trouble. To tell you the truth, Emperor of the Underworld, the few of us fled here for our lives." He wanted to say that he was here to collect information, but he reckoned that he wouldn't be able to fool the other party. He might as well just admit that he was a coward. "You're just an ignorant junior. I don't have time to waste on you." The scholar waved his hand and retracted the soundproof barrier. He then said calmly to the people below, "Zhang Jun, let them go." After saying this, he disappeared from the roof. A streak of white light moved as fast as lightning, disappearing into the distant horizon in the blink of an eye. Chapter 1056. Seeing the Emperor of the Underworld fly away, Yu Qianchou felt depressed. He had wanted to strike while the iron was hot and form a relationship with the Emperor of the Underworld. Who would have thought that the Emperor of the Underworld would leave without any warning? Little did he know that the Emperor of the Underworld would shamelessly come here to express his goodwill. For someone who was used to being in a superior position, it was already very awkward. Although he still maintained his demeanor on the surface, he was extremely embarrassed and did not have the face to stay here any longer. Hearing that the Emperor of the Underworld would let them go, Songyun Exin and Xin Yu were overjoyed. They did not know what Yu Qianchou had said to the Emperor of the Underworld to let them pass safely. The red-armored soldier also looked at Yu Qianchou with a puzzled expression. He also wanted to know what the Emperor of the Underworld had said to Yu Qianchou, but it was not convenient for him to ask about the Emperor of the Underworld. He could only snort coldly and say, "You guys are lucky today. Get out." Yu Qianchou stood on the roof and looked at the red-armored soldier below. He still felt like he was dreaming. He did not expect to see the Emperor of the Underworld, Bai Qi, under such circumstances. He did not expect Bai Qi to reward him. It was too unexpected. Hearing Zhang Jun telling them to scram, Yu Qianchou looked towards the distance where the red light filled the sky. He casually took out his flying shuttle and jumped on it. Grey Cloud Xian and Xin Yu understood his intention and flashed up. The 3 of them saluted the red-armored soldiers below. Afterwards, Ash Cloud Xin took over the flying shuttle without any complaints and quickly drove it away. Standing on the square above the sea of lava, the red-armored soldier looked in the direction they were going. His eyes were filled with confusion. He mumbled to himself, "They are going there. Did the Emperor of the Underworld give them a mission?" The flying shuttle flew across the sky. Below them was still the sea of lava. The screams from time to time could no longer attract the attention of the three people above. Xianxia stood at the front of the flying shuttle. After a while he could not help but ask, "Xianxia, is the token of the Emperor of the Underworld in your hand real?" "Of course it's fake. But if the Underworld Emperor says it's real, then it's real." Xianxia let out a sigh of relief and said, "It's all good now. We can use the endless horizon to directly enter the mysterious forbidden area. There shouldn't be any danger on this trip." This was not what Grey Cloud Xian wanted to hear. He was shocked to see the Underworld Emperor safe and sound. After a moment of silence he asked again, "What did the Underworld Emperor tell you?" "Old song. This is related to the Emperor of the Underworld, so it's really inconvenient to divulge it." "Please excuse me," Xianxia said with a perfunctory chuckle. Grey Cloud Xian's face twitched and he shut up. Xinyu sat alone at the back of the flying shuttle. He did not look too good and he seemed to be in low spirits. It seemed that meditating was indeed not suitable for him to stay in the endless horizon. Even though they were flying in the sky far away from the ground, the temperature was still like a furnace, making him feel a little unbearable. However, this fellow had no human rights and could only endure it. Fortunately, Xianxia discovered it in time. He asked Grey Cloud Xian to change his original flight path and fly horizontally above the Netherworld River Basin. They continued to fly along the Netherworld River Basin, which made Xinyu feel better. Time passed day by day as they flew endlessly. Xianxia was bored and he would occasionally drop one of the silver balls he was playing with into the Nether River Basin below. As time passed, the two sides of the Netherworld River, which were sometimes wide and sometimes narrow, gradually drew closer. They could no longer see the vast and boundless water surface of the Netherworld River. Until one day the sea of lava on both sides of the Netherworld River was suddenly left behind them. A cool breeze blew past them. Xianxia stood on the flying shuttle and waved his hands behind him as he cheered, "We've finally flown out of the endless horizon." Grey Cloud Xian's slightly tired face finally revealed a hint of relief. They had been flying at high speed for almost 2 months without stopping for a moment. Even though he had a high cultivation base, he still felt that it was a little too much. At the same time he could not help but sigh. The vastness of the Netherworld had exceeded his expectations. "Don't be too happy too early. There's at most 1 more month before the Celestial Emperor's wedding. Even if we return now, we won't make it in time." Xianxia coldly looked at Xianxia and reminded him. In fact, he had already reminded him countless times along the way. However, Xianxia was determined to continue forward. Xianxia told him not to meddle in other people's business and said that he had a way to return in time. Grey Cloud Xian thought that Dijie would not disregard his own life, so he waited to see how Dijie would return in time. Hearing his words, Xianxia was about to repeat the same old story, but he saw Jiyu walking to the front of the flying shuttle in a daze. He inserted himself in front of Grey Cloud Xian, who was frowning, and slowly knelt down. He faced the cool night wind and began to cry. His tears flowed down his face. Xianxia walked forward and exchanged glances with Grey Cloud Xian. They both felt a little strange. Then they heard Jiyu choking on his sobs and muttering to himself, "I'm back. After 150,000 years. I'm finally back." Although the voice was soft, the two of them could hear it clearly at such a close distance. Surprised, they couldn't help but look at their surroundings. The two sides of the Netherworld River were empty plains that were like the Gobi Desert. Not a single undulation could be seen, and the Netherworld River below them was at most 100 meters wide. "You used to cultivate here?" Xianxia asked suspiciously. Ji was shocked and realized that he had lost his composure. He panicked and suddenly remembered something. He suddenly stood up and shouted at the two of them, "Slow down. Slow down, it's very dangerous here." Not only did he slow down, Grey Cloud Xian directly stopped the flying shuttle in the air. He narrowed his eyes and said in a deep voice, "Jiyu, what's going on?" "This area is the isolation zone between the Netherworld and the mysterious forbidden area. Don't think that it's peaceful here. In fact, it's full of danger. The invisible and mysterious power that can tear everything apart can appear in the air at any time. It's very powerful. Even the immortal emperor of the immortal world and the netherworld emperor of the netherworld don't dare to trespass here. Jiyu pointed at the netherworld river in front and below. In this isolation zone, whether it's on land or in the water, even underground, there are no living creatures. It's because they can't survive the invisible and mysterious power. Yu Qianqiu and Grey Cloud Exen looked at each other. No wonder no one dared to trespass the forbidden area of the netherworld. It was because of this reason. However, the two of them had suspicions in their eyes. Yu Qianqiu touched his chin and sneered. Do you think the two of us are fools or idiots? Since no living creatures can survive here, why were you able to cultivate here in the past? You should be punished. Grey Cloud Exen stared at Jiyu and shouted coldly. Looks like we can't let him live anymore. Otherwise, who knows what traps are waiting for us ahead. After all, we're not familiar with this place at all. Yu Qianqiu frowned and looked at Jiyu, but he didn't object. Jiyu looked at the two of them and smiled bitterly. I won't hide it from you now. Actually, you've misunderstood. This isn't the place where I cultivated in the past. As he said that, he raised his hand and pointed ahead along the Netherworld River. He sighed. Follow this Netherworld River straight ahead. With Eldritch Song's flying speed, it won't take more than a day for you to see a waterfall that flows down from a tall mountain. I came down from that waterfall back then. As long as we cross that tall mountain, we'll reach the legendary forbidden area of the Netherworld. And I am from the so-called mysterious forbidden area of the Netherworld. Yu Qianqiu and Songyun Xian were stunned. Both of them had suspected that this fellow was hiding some sort of secret, but none of them had imagined that this fellow's origins would be so strange. He was actually from the mysterious Netherworld forbidden area, and it was too inconceivable. Grey Cloud Xian's throat moved and he said with some difficulty in a threatening tone, You're not lying to us, are you? There's no need. I want to go back alive, so there's no need to lie to you. There was a trace of nostalgia hidden in Jiuyu's lonely expression. He looked ahead and sighed faintly. More than 1,000,000 years ago I was born in a lake there. I was ignorant and carefree. Only after 500,000 years did my spiritual wisdom appear. Another 500,000 years later, I was lucky enough to find the way of cultivation. It only took me 50,000 years to cultivate to the early stage of Underworld Lord. Just when I broke through to the early stage of Netherworld Venerable, which was 150,000 years ago, I was suddenly possessed and wanted to see the outside world. Therefore, I followed the small river that connected the lake and finally stood on the waterfall. I hesitated for a long time, but in the end I couldn't help but go with the flow. In the end I came to the so-called Netherworld River. Who knew that the outside world was extremely dangerous? It was the first time I met the Water Tribe in the Netherworld River. They wanted to take my life because of a disagreement. I was so scared that I fled in a panic. I ran far away before I got out of danger. After that, I didn't want to stay outside anymore. I wanted to go back to where I left. But my fate was really full of misfortune. Every time I wanted to go back the way I came, I would always encounter some dangerous things. It was as if God was playing a joke on me. It worked every time. Not only did I fail to come back, but I was also getting further and further away from where I wanted to go. Just like that, I spent 150,000 years in the river Styx with nowhere to go. I thought that I would never be able to return in this lifetime. I left home so far away and experienced so many dangers. I no longer had the courage to return because I was too scared to try again. Until I met you too. It was the first time I had the courage to taste the flesh of a human in the immortal world. Who knew that I was as unlucky as ever? You know what happened next? I never dreamed that I would be able to come back here in this lifetime. There was such an unlucky guy in this world. Yu Qianqiu and Songyun Exen looked at each other. While they felt it was unbelievable, they also sighed for Jiyu's fate. Songyun Exen looked ahead and asked with a frown, I don't know what's so mysterious about this netherworld forbidden land. What's in the forbidden land? This. Jiyu hesitated for a while and smiled bitterly. I didn't think that place was mysterious before, but after coming out and getting in touch with the outside world, I realized that it's a place far away from the three realms. There were quite a few tombs scattered about. If one were to ask whose tombs they were, using the language of the three realms, those tombs were the tombs of gods. Dead gods were buried there. The so-called forbidden land of the netherworld is actually a vast mausoleum of the gods. Chapter 1057. The Tomb of the God of Sin. Yu Qianqiu and Songyun Exen exclaimed in unison. Their eyes were wide open and they almost spat out their tongues. They had all kinds of speculations about the forbidden land of the underworld, but they never dreamed that the so-called mysterious forbidden land was actually the mausoleum of the god of sin, the resting place of the dead gods. Don't be surprised. It's really the mausoleum of the god of sin. I didn't lie to you, Xinyu assured them again. The two of them didn't think that Xinyu was lying to them, they just thought it was too unbelievable. After digesting this shocking news, Yu Qianzhou stared at him with sparkling eyes and asked in a deep voice, "From what you said, you seem to have a way to pass through this dangerous isolation zone and return to the forbidden area?" "Yes." Xinyu nodded. "Xinyu, I understand what you mean. You want me to remove the restriction spell in your body and let you go home." Yu Qianzhou said firmly, "I can remove the restriction spell in your body, but only if you bring us in." "What?" Before Xinyu could answer, Songyun Exin exclaimed, "Yu Qianzhou, you must be tired of living. If it's really the mausoleum of the god of sin, how can we barge in with our cultivation?" Yu Qianzhou raised an eyebrow and said, "You don't have to go in and wait for me here. But since I'm here and there's a great opportunity in front of me, how can I not go in and broaden my horizons?" "Crazy. You're completely crazy. You're a lunatic." Songyun Xian's expression twitched. Yu Qianzhou had his own purpose and didn't bother to argue with him. He continued to ask Xinyu, "Xinyu, what do you think?" "This." Xinyu was quite hesitant. He didn't know if he should bring an outsider in. Was it up to him? After some consideration, he gritted his teeth and said, "Fine. As long as you remove the restriction spell in my body, I'll bring you in." Then it's settled. However, you can't let your guard down. I can't remove the seal in your body right now. You'll have to wait until I'm safely inside, Yu Qianzhou said bluntly. Songyun Exin gritted his teeth once more and said, "Yu Qianzhou, don't blame me for not reminding you. You and I don't know anything about the situation inside, so you have to consider clearly whether it's worth the risk." Yu Qianzhou frowned. Songyun Xian's words were not wrong. Although he was worried about Bai Chongqun's life and death, it was not wise to blindly take the risk. He paused and said, "Xinyu, tell me honestly, is there any danger in the forbidden area? If you dare to lie to me, you'll have to bear the consequences. I'm not a soft-hearted person. Think carefully before you speak." Xinyu sighed slightly and said, "It's impossible to say that there's no danger at all. Most of the gods who died had loyal subordinates when they were alive, and most of them would have someone guarding their mausoleum after they died. They guarded the mausoleum of the gods they were loyal to and generally did not care about others. As long as we know our place and do not trespass into the area they were guarding, nothing will happen. So that's how it is." Yu Qianzhou nodded slightly and looked around before asking, "You said that Jin Tai and Bai Qi did not dare to trespass this isolation zone with their cultivation, but you, a mere underworld supremacy, can come and go as you please. Is there a secret passage here?" "There's no secret passage." Zhu Yu pondered and shook his head. "Actually, I don't know the reason either. Others would be crushed to pieces by that mysterious power here, but when I encounter that mysterious power, it always turns from majestic to gentle, like a gentle breeze brushing past me. I still can't figure out why. Perhaps it has something to do with the fact that I was born inside and the people inside. There was such a strange thing." The two people beside him looked at each other and looked at Xinyu suspiciously, as if they wanted to see something different about him. However, they were not that observant. After a moment of silence, Yu Qianzhou waved at Xinyu and said, "Bring me in." "Wait." Songyun Exin shouted and stared at Yu Qianzhou. He snorted and said, "Once you remove the restriction on him inside, you will no longer be able to restrain him. Even if there's no danger inside, have you thought about how you're going to pass through this isolation zone when you come back? I'm afraid you'll never be able to come back." He had no choice but to be careful. Now that Yu Qianzhou's life was related to his life, the Immortal Palace might even find an excuse to attack the Passionless Palace. Even if he could hide in the Netherworld and not go back, ignoring the existence of the Heartless Palace, if the Heartless Palace was really destroyed, he, Grey Cloud Xian, would lose his backing to deter others. It would be very difficult for him to survive in the Netherworld alone. At the same time, the Immortal Palace would not allow him to hide in the Netherworld and live comfortably. Yu Qianzhou was stunned. He did not think about this at all because it was not a problem for him at all. He could leave whenever he wanted to. Xinyu smiled bitterly and said, "Then what does Mr. Tsang want?" Send us out safely and then let him remove the restriction on you. Song Yun-exen narrowed his eyes. Yu Qianzhou was stunned again. Didn't you say you wouldn't go in? Song Yun-exen looked around, then glanced at him and said, since there is no danger inside and it's a rare opportunity to see the mausoleum of the god of sin, why not go in and have a look? He said this against his will. In fact, he did not want to go in at all, but he did not have the courage to stay in this damn place alone. Who knew if he would run into that mysterious power? Moreover, he did not know when Yu Qianzhou would come back. It should be known that the longer he stayed, the more likely it was that he would run into it. If he did not wait for Yu Qianzhou to come out, he did not dare to go back alone. He did not dare to believe that the three of them could make it all the way here. At least he was not confident that he could return the way he came from. All along the way, Yu Qianzhou had repeatedly turned danger into safety, causing him to feel that it was safer to be by Yu Qianzhou's side. In short, in the end, it was a fact that he wasn't willing to admit. He was afraid. What if after I send you out, you don't help me remove the restriction in my body? Zhou Yu said with a bitter face. He could not help but worry. What if these two fellows saw that he could enter and exit the forbidden area at will and wanted to take him as their exclusive property? That was a very likely possibility. Song Yun-exen immediately sneered and said, you have no choice. You have to agree whether you want to or not. Otherwise, I will make it so that you will never be able to go back. Yu Qianzhou looked at him in pain. This was clearly a threat. If he did not agree, he would kill him. Zhou Yu looked helpless. He really had no choice but to resign himself to fate. He said sadly, I agree. His goal was achieved. Song Yun-exen snorted and did not speak. Yu Qianzhou patted Zhou Yu's shoulder and comforted him. Don't worry. I, Yu Qianzhou, am a man of my word. Before I leave this place, I will remove the restriction in your body and let you go back safely. What do we do now? In fact, this place was more difficult than ascending to heaven for others, but it was not a problem for Zhou Yu. He asked Yu Qianzhou to put away the flying shuttle and revealed his true form again. He opened his clamshell and wrapped the two of them inside. Then he dove into the river Styx below and continued to move quickly along the river Styx. In less than half an hour, Zhou Yu, who was moving quickly in the water, constantly felt the mysterious and terrifying power crushing and tearing at him. From time to time, his huge clamshell would shine with a gorgeous light. Whenever the mysterious and terrifying power encountered the light, it would slip past his body. The further they went, the more frequent the mysterious power appeared. As they encountered it more frequently, the faint light on Zhou Yu's body flickered non-stop. In the end, the light on his body was like a lamp that would never be extinguished. It was obvious that the mysterious power had completely filled this space. It was impossible to sneak past it. 3 days. With Song Yun-exen's cultivation, driving the flying shuttle would not take more than a day. However, Zhou Yu took a full 3 days. In front of them, a 1,000-meter-tall mountain appeared. The entire mountain extended endlessly to the left and right like a tall great wall. The mountain faced the river Styx, and there was a huge waterfall that looked like the Milky Way falling from the 9 heavens. From the top of the mountain, one could hear the loud sound of water falling. The water of the river Styx came from it. Zhou Yu, who was rapidly approaching, shot out of the huge pool that the waterfall created at the foot of the mountain. He went against the flow of the waterfall and soon reached the top of the waterfall. From below, it looked like a mountain, but when he reached the top, he saw a plain with a river flowing on it. We're here. You can come out now. Zhou Yu's voice was very excited. He slowly floated out of the water and opened his huge clamshell. After 2 figures flashed to the shore, he also turned into his human form and went to the shore. The sound of flowing water came from beside the 3 of them. The waterfall was not far from their feet. Zhou Yu knelt on the ground and covered his face with his hands as he sobbed, I'm really back. Yu Qianzhou and Song Yun-exen, on the other hand, looked at their surroundings dumbfounded. The direction in which the waterfall flowed was like a black curtain falling from the sky. They could vaguely see the mountains and rivers below. It was the netherworld that they had come from. On the mountain, behind them, upstream of the river, with the edge of the mountain as the boundary, there was a strange scene that was clearly separated from the foot of the mountain. Although the mountain and the foot of the mountain both looked like it was night, it was like 2 different worlds. The night at the foot of the mountain was forever immersed in endless darkness, but the night at the top of the mountain was filled with twinkling stars. There was also a bright moon hanging in the night sky. The white moonlight shone on the ground like mercury, allowing everything to be seen clearly. Yu Qianqiu and Songyun Xian's mouths were wide open as they looked up at the bright moon in the sky. This moon was not like the moon they had seen in the mortal world or the immortal world. It was dozens or even hundreds of times bigger than the moon they had seen before. The huge moon hanging in the sky was terrifying,